I am so ready. I have ice on my nipples. I am good to go.
Oh, God.
Did you paint them red?
Oh, yeah. Gosh.
I hope this goes on to the episode. I think we need the nipple paint as an integral part of this particular episode here.
Christopher Media. Let's make some noise.
So what are you going to Vegas for? You gonna win?
I'm gonna dance.
There's a spot open in the chorus line. We're auditioning tomorrow morning. I think you should try out.
I got an audition!
Okay, ladies, I got one interest here, and that's the show. I don't care whether you live or die. I want to see you dance, and I want to see you smile. I can't use you if you can't smile. I can't use you if you can't show. I can't use you if you can't sell.
From the creators of Basic Instinct, the last time they took you to the edge. This time, they're taking you all the way.
We take the cash, we cash the check, we show them what they want to see.
You got more natural talent when you dance than anybody I've ever seen. She's going down to the Stardust. She's gonna be in the show.
Great! If someone gets in your way, step on them. It's not fair.
It's not about fair. It's about power. You're a stripper, don't you get it?
I'm a dancer.
She's dazzling, she's exciting, and she's what Las Vegas is all about.
The passion is real.
I can fall in love with you.
The desire is intense.
You can't touch me, but I can touch you. I'd really love to touch you.
And the show is about to begin. Showgirls. Leave your inhibitions at the door.
Welcome to the projection booth. I'm your host, Mike White. Joining me is Ms. Heather Drain.
Hello.
Also with us this week is Mr. Jay-bauman.
Man, everyone got AIDS and shit.
They should write a song about that.
I bet somebody has.
This week we are talking about the 1995 film Showgirls, directed by Paul Verhoeven and written by Joe Eszterhas. The film was a follow-up of sorts of their 1992 hit film Basic Instinct. It stars Elizabeth-Berkley as Nomi Malone, a volatile young woman from different places who comes to Las Vegas to dance. There she meets scads of colorful characters while going from stripper to showgirl in a wild rags to riches tale. Heather, when was the first time you saw Showgirls, and what did you think?
Well, the first time I saw Showgirls was back sometime in the late 90s when I was in high school, and I'm pretty sure it was one of those things where either my parents were on a date or I couldn't sleep, so I got up to see what was on cable. And, of course, on paid cable was Showgirls, and I was like, ooh, I remember there being so much controversy about it, and so I watched it, and I thought it was alternately compelling and horrible. Like, I thought it was like a really weird amalgam of great things and terrible things. And that was my initial impression.
Watching it for this show, maybe the first time I've ever seen it in its entirety from start to finish in order. But I know I saw it on cable a lot because it when it first hit cable, it was on all the time. So I saw the whole thing in maybe 20, 30-minute chunks, just not all at once. And I just remember after all the controversy and the marketing of the movie was, oh, it's this naughty thing. We can't show you anything in the trailer and all this stuff. And I just remember being kind of bored by what was supposed to be the sexy stuff, and then bored by what I saw as just sort of a lame attempt at satire, which was not something people really seemed to talk about at the time. People just thought of it as this horrible movie, this failure. But I was like, well, this is clearly, I mean, it's Paul Verhoeven. It's clearly going for something sort of satirical, but it just kind of fails at that, too.
I saw this one in the theater when it came out, because there's no way in hell I was going to miss this landmark film that just people were going crazy about. I had seen Basic Instinct in the theater probably 4 or 5 times because I was writing a paper about it in college. At least let's pretend that's why I saw it so many times. And Yeah, I was a huge fan of RoboCop. This was pre-Starship Troopers, so I kind of knew about that satire that you're talking about, and of course Total Recall, big fan of that one too. So I knew about that satire, but I just couldn't really see it that well the first time through. And while putting together this episode, I read, the Showgirls It Doesn't Suck book, listened to the audio commentary, just really tried to immerse myself in this thing, but I held off on rewatching the film until last night just to see if I could get that real clear take on it and see that satire for what it was and kind of have that moment when I realized, Starship Troopers is so brilliant. I'm sure that there's something in Showgirls that I missed back in 1995. I just didn't see it this time either. So I don't know. There are moments and there are some just hilarious things, and I love how campy it is. But man, this movie just it's weird. It's a strange movie. It's got a strange tone to it.
Which tone?
It's as schizophrenic as Know Me Malone.
Yes, it feels like you're watching, because everyone else acts, they do their best. Like, everyone's fine in the movie. But then at the center of it, you have Elizabeth-Berkley, and you're just like, what is she even going for?
It also taught me a whole lot as far as, like, the hierarchy of Las Vegas. I really didn't know, like, the whole behind-the-scenes thing of prostitutes apparently are at the bottom, and then stripping above that, and then Showgirl is, like, the pinnacle of, high society, it seems like, in Las Vegas.
I'm assuming the movie is a very accurate reflection of the way that all works.
Well, it felt very cinema verite. Quite a few times.
Some have referred to it as a docudrama, but these people may have been snorting the same batch of cocaine that Joe Eszterhas was undoubtedly snorting when he wrote this script.
Everybody's got AIDS and shit, and everybody's got some cocaine going on in this movie. And it just really reminded me of like a 1980s film that kind of escaped into the 1990s.
I attribute that to Joe Eszterhas. Like, he feels very 80s. Like, probably even now. I don't even know. He kind of stopped writing, right, after this movie?
He was the flavor for so long, too. And I remember, like, you were talking about the controversy around this film, and I remember when, what was it, Eszterhas sold, like, a 2-page treatment for $10 million or some shit like that. It was just, like, insane the amount of money his scripts were getting, even the ones that never got produced.
Yeah, it's pretty depressing because, I mean, you think about guys like Hodorowski who, had to wait like 20 to 30 years to make a film. Meanwhile, Eszterhas farts out something on a napkin in the 90s and he gets like all those millions of dollars for just really hackneyed. I mean, the plot of this film is like, it's hackneyed. It's like All About Eve meets Girl with Gold Boots, which I know we'll get to later in the show. But it's bizarre. I mean, it's like reading somebody's Coke jag while they're watching these different old movies.
And when you look at his filmography, I mean, he really scored big with something like Flashdance, which there's a lot of elements of Flashdance in this, at least as far as what I see. And then things like Jagged Edge, and then a whole bunch of shit that I never saw and really didn't hear about. But I remember Jagged Edge, and it just wasn't that great of a thing. But I guess that whole idea of like these sexy thrillers were so big in the 80s. I mean, starting with kind of like Fatal Attraction, that you could just kind of slap together one of these things and become a millionaire.
Well, I do think Joe Eszterhas was the perfect person to write this movie, because if anyone listening to this Googles Joe Eszterhas, look at images of him, and he's very clearly a man that understands women and the way women interact. All they do is talk about their bodies and food.
A lot of talk about tits in this movie, and a lot of talk about doing people's nails.
Yes.
You guys are getting a very privileged peek into the private sisterhood of women. So thank you, Joe Eszterhas, for revealing all of our secrets.
I'm surprised they just didn't strip down to their underwear and have a pillow fight.
Well, there is a pillow fight in the sequel, but I don't want to reveal too much until we get...
Oh, no. Am I the only one that hasn't seen the sequel?
Uh-oh.
Oh, very naughty.
I haven't watched it yet.
Have you guys ever been to a Las Vegas review and seen Showgirls, like in the wild, as it were?
I have not. Sadly, I have yet to visit Las Vegas.
Yeah, me either. All my knowledge of Showgirls and Las Vegas comes from the movie Showgirls.
Maybe things were different back in 1995, but when I went to Vegas in, say, like 1999, which I know was so far removed from 1995, at least my experience of a Showgirls show at a casino was basically if you do anything, they're going to comp you tickets for the Showgirls show. And it's a lot of like bad comedians and women in these like kind of skimpy things, or you can go to like the one of the more upscale ones. I'm trying to remember what it's called, like the Crazy Horse Review at the MGM and stuff. And that's just a lot of women who are kind of dancing, almost like Rockettes kind of thing. And it's really strange too, because like none of them have any breasts to speak of. So like as they're like dancing and stuff, there's barely any jiggle going on. It's just like, this is really kind of strange here. It's not nearly the theatrics and the press conference worthy kind of stuff. I don't remember turning on the 6 o'clock news in Las Vegas and seeing any reports about the latest, review over at the Stardust or anything. That's all I'm trying to say. I know.
Well, that's one of the many surreal elements of the movie, because, when they have the whole press conference with Crystal Connors, and, it's like, I'm like, that seems a bit weird for a showgirl to get that kind of, you never hear about that certainly outside of Vegas. But then on top of that, when she ends up having her injury, they're all talking who to replace her, and one guy's like, what about Paula Abdul? And it's like, you really think Paula Abdul's gonna start shaking her tatas and do this like horrible looking show called Goddess? I mean, in a perfect world perhaps, but I mean, it's the universe of Showgirls is not latched into any sort of reality.
I was really reminded of Staying Alive when I was watching any of the Showgirls type stuff.
Oh God.
And I kept waiting for Travolta to come out there with the headband and stuff and just slide across on his knees, across the stage. But yeah, he never showed up to rescue me. Instead, I just got Crystal Connors, played by Gina-Gershon, and just all of these people in the same wigs and outfits and just doing these really elaborate moves with these crazy kind of, and I know everything is amped up for the movie and everything, but even if you took it down quite a few notches, the pyrotechnics and all this kind of stuff are not necessarily what I remember. But then again, I didn't go to the Stardust. I'm just talking purely Flamingo Riviera style. So yeah, maybe the Stardust, maybe that's what put him out of business in 2006.
The pageantry, it was just too much pageantry.
We're spending way too much money on the show.
Well, not only did they go out of business, didn't they blow up the building? Didn't they completely tear down the building?
Oh yeah, they do those demolitions there quite often. I think I remember seeing one for like either the Aladdin or the Sahara, one of those. But yeah, when the old casinos go out, they go out in a big way.
Yeah, I like to think they did it to purify the space after the taint of Showgirls, Probably not, but it's a nice thought.
Now, how about stripping? Have you guys been to strip clubs before?
I have only once, but I will say they did actually, one of the girls did dance to a Prince song, which I always expected that after seeing Showgirls. I just had this assumption when I saw it as a teenager that if you go to a strip club, somebody is going to take their top off to Prince. And it was correct. It was a correct assumption, which I love Prince. So
I've been to strip clubs, never any like this. And I think if I were getting a lap dance and the person giving me the lap dance started having a seizure, I would probably call the manager. I would be terrified. The things she does to Kyle-MacLachlan in this movie are horrifying.
Yeah.
Oh, can you imagine if this film was rooted in reality? That at midway he would have been like, "Ma'am, you're starting to chafe me and it hurts.
Yeah.
Would you please stop?"
That's the thing I remember most from 1995 was the two kind of Kyle-MacLachlan, Nomi Malone scenes. Just, especially the one in the swimming pool. I really was afraid for Elizabeth-Berkley's life.
Her life or for Kyle-MacLachlan's life?
Yes, for both of them, really. Her for drowning, him for having a broken pelvis.
That pool scene, I actually, when I first saw it when I first saw the film, it really scared me because I was almost like, is an alien going to burst out of her chest? I mean, to be able to take something out of like an 80s sci-fi film where it's like, the alien sexy host is seducing the man and that's the perfect time for, the creature to burst out and, latch onto his face. Now that would have been, I'd like to see that in Showgirls.
That'd be a great, twist if it just turned into a completely different genre, like From Dusk Till Dawn or something.
I think there was a similar scene in Species. Now that you say,
there is. I watched Species yesterday, actually, and there's a seduction in a pool scene in that as well. It's not quite as incomprehensible and violent, but yeah.
Was that as research for the show?
No, it's actually because I had watched Under the Skin the day before, and for whatever reason it reminded me of Species. So I was like, I have not seen Species since it came out, so I rewatched Species. It's not as good as Under the Skin, believe it or not.
Well, because Forrest Whitaker wasn't there as the most obvious psychic in the world.
He goes into a room covered with blood and says, "Something bad happened in here.
I sense violence." I have been to strip clubs in Las Vegas a few times now, and none of them compare at all to Nomi's strip club, I have to say. It's just not nearly, maybe again, I'm going on the wrong night or something. I mean, having that really obnoxious woman who can take her top down by flapping her arms and stuff.
Oh, Mama Bazoom.
Mama's Bazoom.
She's channeling Divine or something with that role.
Yes. She was more in line with the showgirl type show that I saw at, I think, the Flamingo or one of those, rather than being at a strip club. And at the strip club, you just get the strippers. And you usually get one on stage at a time. So I was very surprised when Nomi and Hope/Penny were out there at the same time. So that was just kind of weird. And stripping it's an interesting thing. And I feel bad for Nomi by how much she hates herself when she's doing the stripping.
Yeah, I mean, my mind actually never quite went there, but I think it's because I think the potential, if this film had a different screenwriter than Eszterhas, and you still kept Verhoeven, who has obviously proven himself very capable of directing seriously great films. I mean, whether we're talking like the stuff he made in Europe, like Soldier of Orange or Spatters, to Flesh and Blood and obviously RoboCop. I mean, if you coupled him with like a serious screenwriter who's actually really good and who doesn't have a whole litany of just like issues with women, this would have been a completely different animal, because you would have had a character that you probably could have empathized with a little bit more, and it would have been a much more serious and effective movie. Because Nomi, to me, is like, she is such a cartoon. I just could never see her as like I never really felt bad for her. I didn't hate her, but to me it's just, half the time she's flying off the rails for no fucking reason. She's throwing French fries around when this girl's trying to be nice to her. I did not understand her universe. This guy bails her out of jail and she just blowing him off. It was just, to me, she was like, I don't know, she was a cartoon character.
That's what's weird about her character, is she treats everybody like dirt, yet everybody wants to help her and prop her up, like through the entire movie.
Yeah, no, that's actually a perfect way to put it, because I was mystified. I'm like, how is this girl this charismatic? I mean, she's not Klaus Kinski, for crying out loud. I don't.
Her friend Molly, the first time they meet, Molly saves her from getting hit by a car, and she's just immediately like, "Fuck you," and runs away. And then Molly gives her a place to live.
After she's beaten the shit out of Molly's car.
Yeah.
After they have a slap fight that causes Nomi to vomit for some reason.
Yeah. What the hell?
See, and that's on the flip side of, Heather, what you were saying about a different screenwriter. I think if you were to take the same script and have a different director do it, it could also be interesting, because I was thinking of David-Lynch a few times throughout this. One, because of Kyle-maclachlan, but also especially that pool scene, the pool sex scene. There are elements of that reminded me of Lynch. Like the soundtrack in that scene is so different than any of the music in the rest of the movie. It's very like ethereal, ambient, creepy music. And that and the violent rape scene that happens late in the movie, where it's the rock star guy, I can't remember his name, but when he's abusing Molly and his friends are like crowded around and they're all standing over. I was thinking of Fire Walk With Me or something. So if you took the elements from the script and gave them to someone like David Lynch, I think you would have an interesting movie there too.
Well, that would be so bizarre if after that pool sex scene that she ends up pregnant and has the baby from Eraserhead.
I would watch that movie.
Well, I think what we're tapping into is a Showgirls number based around in heaven everything is fine, and it could be dedicated to the late Peter Ivers. I can't believe Peter Ivers. Please don't haunt me for invoking your wonderful name in this fascinating atrocity of a movie. We're going to take a break and play an interview with Jessica Flowers, a former professional dancer.
What is the preferred terminology? Because I hear sometimes dancing, sometimes stripping.
Yeah, I think it depends on how seriously a girl takes the actual performance part of it as opposed to the going in and making money part of it. Me personally, as an artist, I was very much into the on-stage presence. Yeah, I took my clothes off while I was dancing, but I called myself an exotic dancer. You know, I think it varies from person to person. Some girls probably don't mind being called strippers. I mean, I never did. I don't take offense to any of them. I consider myself an exotic dancer.
Now, had you been a dancer before this, or was this your foray into dancing?
I was dancing from the age of 19 to 28, and that was, I'm going to give my age away, but yeah, I'm 41 now, so that was a long time ago. But I enjoyed it and really never thought it would come back up in any facet of my life. Through some changes in life, decided to explore the online camming, and I finally put my roots down solid in the same sort of industry, but on a different aspect of it as an online dominatrix.
So now 10 years of dancing, I take it that you enjoyed it?
Very much so, yeah. I'm sort of a junkie when it comes to music and performing and that sort of thing, and getting to know people, that was my other favorite thing about it, was all the different kinds of people that you get to meet, from the girls to the owners to the clients, all in between, everything in between. So I was getting to use my people skills. I'm a social butterfly, so that was working out fine. I was comfortable with nudity. I didn't think there was anything wrong with being nude. And I got to be creative and sort of design my own persona as well as I went through, and evolved as a dancer in my 10 years. And I started out with shy, squeamish girl who thought she had to wear this or wear that, and developed my own personality for Serene.
Yeah, now tell me about Serene. How did you come up with the name, and what was that personality that almost, would you call it like a character that you were performing?
It could be like a character, yeah. The way that I got the name actually was because the first night that I ever danced, I was being taken in by a couple who recruited me, if you will. And they asked me what my stage name was going to be, and I had no idea. I just got out of the Air Force. I was 19 years old. I was like, I don't know. And so he just popped up with Serene, and it stuck magically. I just seemed to have like when I talked to clients and I told them my name, they said it suited me fine, and that it wasn't, bubbles, or it wasn't, glittery. And I was a very, sort of down to earth, and, I wasn't the loud, rowdy one who was running around, and I wasn't obnoxious or anything. I was pretty tame, I guess. That's how it goes.
Now, when it comes to the world of exotic dancing, how does necessarily the pay work? Because it seems like, there's the tipping, like the couch dances or backroom type dances. How do those things kind of break down for you as being the actual dancer? And I know that this is a few years ago, so you don't have to necessarily tell me prices and that kind of stuff because of inflation.
Basically, it changes from club to club. And I worked up and down the eastern and northeastern seaboard. I found that typically from state to state it would change, and sometimes in the states, depending on which county you were in. But it varied everything from how many cocktails you could sell in a night, which would buy the client time with you. So say if I sold a $100 drink with a client, then I'd sit with them on the sofa for 20 minutes and you get one lap dance out of it. At the end of the night, that breaks down to the more drinks you get, the more of a percentage of that you get. There were other clubs where you just worked for tips. I worked at clubs where you have to pay to walk through the door to work. So it just depends on the clubs, but typically the girls that are going to do well on stage first, and then they're the real go-getters that just run around doing lap dances all night long. And I sort of like to stick with one client for a while, so I tended to get what are called suits with the businessmen who would sit down and they didn't want to necessarily go with some of the girls that were a little more aggressive and spend more time with them. They spend all their evening with you. So that was sort of the niche that I found for myself as far as being successful with making money. It wasn't so much jumping from client to client.
Can you tell me about the lap dances? Because I know in my own experience, we're talking about Showgirls this week, and there's definitely a lap dance that happens in Showgirls that personally I've never experienced before, but then again, I've never had that kind of Crystal Connors type money that is thrown around in the film.
They vary too. I mean, what specifically are you asking? Like,
being in Detroit, things are different as far as what takes place in Detroit versus what takes place in Windsor as far as the amount of clothes that can be taken off. But then there's also usually, you're in the back room. I think some people have this whole idea, I think it was like a Chris Rock bit where
there's no sex in the champagne room.
I've never seen sex in the champagne room, nor do I think it goes on. But I'm curious as far as like, do we go as far as Nomi and Zach and Showgirls, or is it more of a, like, just kind of a private dance and it's a nice experience type of thing?
That, again, varies from girl to girl and client to client, but typically what a VIP room or a bottle of champagne or a split or however it's sold, however they define what's being sold, and that typically varies by law, which laws mandate that state's liquor licenses or whatever. Typically, they're either full contact or no contact. I've done lap dances in some places where you can only dance around in front of the gentleman. He couldn't actually touch you at all. There were other places where you could touch him, but he couldn't touch you, so you could sit on his lap if you wanted to and bump and grind, but he couldn't put his hand on you anywhere. And then I've also worked in clubs where the lap dances were completely nude and there was full contact. As far as the sex part of it goes, there's probably a sex in the champagne room, but I've oftentimes seen it lead to girls leaving the club with a gentleman or something along those lines. So, I mean, that's the thing about it. It's really difficult to categorize all strip clubs or all strippers or all exotic dancers because each girl has their own agenda, and some girls are really comfortable doing certain things that other girls would never do for money, and, vice versa. So, as far as the clientele as well, some guys would never look for that in a strip club, and some guys go there just for that, to try to get a girl to leave with them. So,
when you were actually up on stage dancing, did you have any sort of like a shtick, or what was kind of the what was your modus operandi when you would get up on stage, and did you were talking about choreographing your own routines and everything? How did that go?
I just basically danced to music that I really felt passionate about, and so it was easy to sort of get into the zone and get into this really sort of sexy, controlling, flirtatious style of moving around on stage, but without necessarily humping the floor or, I was also pretty strong and did a lot of pole tricks, and some of the clubs that I worked in had overhead poles, and so I'd be doing sort of gymnastics or aerobatic type things up there, but I always wore boots. That was my shtick. I always had to wear boots. I sort of felt like they could see me butt naked, but they weren't going to get to see my legs. It was sort of like my own little sort of cover up, but I always just tried to put on a really good performance on stage. And some clubs you work at, you have no control over the music, what's going to be played for you. So you just kind of have to try to keep your personality alive when that happens. Not focus so much on the music, maybe even play a different song in your head, kind of.
No, you talking knee length, thigh high? What kind of boots?
Thigh high. And a lot of little black leathery strappy things, and I also always carried a riding crop.
So you made that transition to dominatrix fairly easily then after you were done?
Fairly quickly. I started out dancing at 19, and I hadn't turned 20 yet before I was wearing nothing but black leather. I'd say it was a pretty rapid transition for me, but it was easy for me to identify with because I sort of had a sheltered life growing up on a military base and then coming out of the military myself, and I was in the big city, and so it was sort of like this super sweet and super kind of innocent, but if you F with me, then I'm just going to smack you across the face in a crop and kick you in the nuts. So it kind of it served two purposes for me. One was that I enjoyed being in control, and the other was that it was a great defense mechanism. People didn't really mess with me too much. Does
every stage that you're dancing on have the pole?
No. There are what are called satellite stages as well. There's sort of like little platforms, little circular, square little platforms that almost look like a big drum or something like that, a coffee table, in clubs where they have a lot of girls working at one time. that I've had to do, but I don't have very good equilibrium, so for me the pole is sort of like a mainstay. If I don't have that pole to hang on to, there's no guarantee that nobody sitting around me is going to get, not going to get fallen on, because I need something to hang on to up there when you're wearing 6-inch stilettos. But they don't always have poles. Mirrors are pretty much a staple as well. I think the mirrors are almost more important than the pole for some girls, but they're called satellite stages, and there's sort of like smaller off to the side, so they could have more girls performing at one time.
You talked a little bit about the music. Do you choose your own tracks when you go up there?
And that depends too. Some clubs have DJs working in them, and some clubs just have a jukebox. Some clubs have DJs that work at night, and then you use the jukebox during the day. So basically, you have to, be pretty flexible with the music that you like to dance to. It just depends. You can even give a DJ, these are my 3 favorite artists or the 3 favorite bands I like to dance to or whatever. I mean, for example, I was in New Jersey one time, and at the time I had braids in my hair, like extension braids down to my waist, and I told him that I wanted to dance to Rage Against the Machine, and I forget what the other 2 were, but he ended up playing like Milli Vanilli, and I can't remember by the time they had those fake braids in their hair. It was, actually ended up being really kind of humiliating to me, and he thought nothing of it, but I thought it was really, embarrassing to be up there doing it. But you just smile through it and just keep doing your thing, and, so you can, there's no, only in a club where you have a jukebox and you get to select your songs as you go, where you have control over the music, and even then, it's limited to what they have in the jukebox.
What were some of your favorite memories of being a dancer for so long?
Helping the girls that would come in that were younger or newer, watching them try to find themselves and, sort of steering them away from any negatives that I knew of. That was one of my favorite things, because I know that I got thrown right into it, and I hadn't experienced modeling, and so this is sort of just like modeling, but with your clothes off. But I'm also very uninhibited. You'd see girls come in that were there strictly because like they had no other source of income whatsoever, or maybe their boyfriends talked them into it or whatever. So trying to empower them, I think, made me feel good, made me feel better. I was always sort of like the den mom. My other favorite experiences were some of the clients that I met. Very interesting and very genuine people, real people with real issues in life, and real, you have a real opportunity to really make a difference in somebody's either day or in somebody's month, or maybe even in somebody's marriage or life. It's not all just glitter and candy cotton flavored body spray. There are real people involved too. So me being the kind of person that I am, those were always my favorite things. And the money. Let's not forget the money. The money was amazing.
So you actually made some pretty good money when you were working there?
Yes, I did. Like I said, I traveled up and down the East Coast to work certain clubs on certain days of the week, and then so I was always sort of like a guest appearance, or what they call a headliner. So you're like the girl that they can only see this weekend, or they're not going to get to see you again until next month or 2 months from now. And I had a pretty good eye for picking out the clients that looked a little classier, I guess is the only way I could really describe it. And I carried myself with class, so I ended up doing pretty well. It's like the less you're willing to give, the more they want to offer to try to get it.
I asked about some of your favorite things. What were some of your least favorite things, other than dancing the Milli Vanilli?
Yeah, because that definitely takes the cake. Least favorite things, the walk-by gropers. Like you're just trying to walk from point A to point B, and all of a sudden you feel someone's fingers like really where they're not supposed to be. And you're just like passing by. So that physical contact wasn't always, and honestly, oftentimes physical contact was not a good fun thing for me. I'd never really enjoyed that unless I knew the client pretty well. And, somebody just throws money at you and wants a lap dance straight away, and it's a full contact club. Well, now you're sitting on a complete stranger's lap, and they could be saying anything and smelling any certain way, and, you just kind of have to deal with it as it goes. But the other least favorite thing, especially with me traveling a lot, was being the women can be extremely catty. Extremely catty. I worked at a club in New York where on my second night there, somebody urinated inside of my work bag with all of my costumes in it. Never figured out who did it, but it was just sort of like a big get out of here to me. So I always thought that was uncool, because I was, really willing to I just wasn't like that. I wasn't competitive like that. Yeah, definitely number one least favorite, getting groped.
When it comes to being around a lot of men while you are in a state of undress or near undress, is there some sort of familiarity where that men seem to immediately have with you as far as like feeling that they are able to grope you and have that not be a problem?
I do think that men in those environments tend to believe, especially after several beers, that the only reason that you're there is to please them. And so if you are walking around in even thigh-high boots, but you have on a thong and a little top, and you're passing by, they don't see a problem with reaching out and touching. And I don't know that they would ever do that anywhere else in their lives. But there are so many women in that industry that take that as a cue. A lot of dancers will, if somebody reaches out and touches them, well, that's a chance to go ask for $1 or try to get them to, buy a drink or whatever. So, I only ever had one person thrown out in 10 years, and I think that's pretty good because, you get groped a lot. You just got to deal with it. You just sort of take it. As of course they're going to this might be the only time they've been out of their house, away from their families or whatever, in 6 months, and this is their chance to party it up and whatever excuse they have to do it. This is sort of like a stomping ground. You have to understand that that's why they're there. 9 times out of 10, that's why they're there, is to be sexually stimulated. And if your half-naked body stimulates them and they feel the need to reach out and touch it, you just kind of got to understand that that's the environment you put yourself into. You're not working at a library, you're working in a strip club.
This always gets to me, and I was very curious if you had ever worked in a club where food was served.
I never worked in a club where food was served intentionally. I always thought that was the most disgusting thing, the most disgusting combination. And typically, I've actually never been into a club, even as a client, where they sold food, but I kind of got the impression that if they're advertising, naked women and an all-you-can-eat buffet, the women probably are not going to be, maybe not the quality that you'd maybe be looking for, like a gentleman's club, and who really wants to really look at, strange women that you don't know or never seen before while you're eating food. I don't know. To me, it's just too much. It's always bothered me, too. And the stories that I've heard from guys that do stop into those places have never been good. So, I never ventured into them myself. But, I think that's really just a really odd combination. Drinks, yes. Food, no.
I was talking about the differences between a Detroit or a Michigan and Canada, and I know you worked in several states as you're going through, so I'm sure everybody has different laws. When it comes to Canada, you can drink alcohol and see almost totally naked women, like they usually wear a garter belt. When it comes to Michigan, you can see fully nude as long as you're drinking soda pop. You can see topless if you are drinking alcohol, but you can never have fully nude and alcohol at the same time in this state. Is it pretty much the general way in the U.S. that you experience, or is it different from state to state?
No, not to my experience. In my experience, it does vary from state to state, and most of it has to do with whether or not each county will have their own stipulations about owning a liquor license and what can go on in an establishment if you own a liquor license. I've worked in clubs that were BYOB and completely nude, and then I've worked in completely nude clubs where, with a full top shelf bar selling, everything from beer to wine coolers to wine to, Macallan. So, I think it just varies from state to state. I've definitely not, seen consistency there either. Like in Florida, you couldn't even be topless if they were selling beer, so in this one county that I worked in, so you had to put 3 layers of liquid latex over your nipples and then powder them and put some glitter on them or whatever to try to make it look not abnormal, so that they could sell beer. Because nobody was going to come in if they didn't have beer.
That almost sounds like you were doing a self-airbrush of your own nipples.
Yeah, it was just make them disappear and make them hygienically clogged, I guess. There's no way that my understanding was that law was there so that there would be no exchange of excretion, which, I don't even want to imagine. why they would need to implement that law, but okay.
You were never lactating while you danced, were you?
Never. No. Nope. I heard there's a big market for it, though.
All right, we are back, and we're talking about Showgirls, so I was glad to get a little bit of insight on what it's actually like to be a stripper, exotic dancer, whatever you want to call it, because that is just, it's so central to the plot. And yeah, like I was saying, Nomi just feels so bad about being that, though she's not a prostitute, and she's very clear about not being a prostitute. And by the time we get to the reason why, we find out why she's so mad when people start calling her a prostitute or a hooker or a whore or anything about that, I've already forgotten.
It's funny because early on, when she keeps being so super reactive to that, and the whole great Gina-Gershon line, you're a whore, darlin, which is Gershon does own this film. I mean, to me, this film, there are people in this film that kind of, I think, going into it, kind of knew exactly what it was, so they just rolled with it. And Gershon, she is the queen in this. But early on, Robert-Davi, the great Robert-Davi, which I do want to take this moment to say, Robert-Davi was amazing in this. He's great in everything. I actually would have rather this film been based around his character than Nomi. But as the sleazy club owner Al, when he says to Penny, like, if you want to stay here something like past a week, you have to give me a blowjob. And I almost wondered if part of Nomi's damage too with the whole whore thing is like, did she have to give him a blowjob to get that job? Like,
because Penny asks if he's serious and nobody answers.
The movie never gives us an answer to that. Yeah.
Well, I have to say, Davi gets it, and especially his line about
must be weird not having anybody come on you.
I have mixed feelings about that line. On one hand, there's a part of me that thinks that's actually a really great line, but it's horrible. It's kind of like the movie Hated, like the G.G. Allen documentary. There's moments in that where somebody will say something and I start laughing, and then I'm like, what am I laughing at? And I have like this moral quandary. But Davi's delivery, I mean, Robert-Davi should be a bigger name. I mean, he's a phenomenal actor.
What if Todd Solondz directed this film?
Oh, Jesus. That'd be the most miserable movie ever made. In a good way.
It would be great, and there'd probably be a lot of suicide hotlines active that night, would be my guess.
It would somehow be a spiritual sequel to Welcome to the Dollhouse. Nomi would actually be Dawn Wiener or something.
Well, it'd be great if, like, every time she gets called a different name, she's actually played by a different actress.
There you go. Yeah.
That's very, very Ben Wool. I love it. Yeah, that's way too intellectual for Eszterhas. So that's...
Alan Ratchins as Tony Moss, the choreographer. I think he gets it too.
Oh yeah. Definitely.
And his man-at-arms Marty, who's played by Patrick Bristow, when he is yelling at Nomi to thrust her crotch.
That's enough. Thank you, ladies.
Well, all that stuff, and like the Robert-Davi line about it must be weird not having anybody come on you. Like, those moments are where it's very clear to me the movie was going for tongue-in-cheek. Right. But then there's so much of it that, because I think Verhoeven tends to, I mean, you look at something like RoboCop or Starship Troopers where, I mean, there are people that watch those movies that don't even get that they're sort of sarcastic, because he rides that line so tight. And so this movie, I think it falters a bit where it feels too like it's trying to be a genuine movie. So there's lots of great lines like that and great little moments like the thrust it, but it's just surrounded by kind of confusion of what it's trying to do.
Sometimes I think like Kyle-maclachlan should have amped it up a little bit. Kyle-maclachlan plays Gina-Gershon. Crystal Connor's her boyfriend, kind of. Zach Carey is his name, but he's kind of her boyfriend. But yet they both seem to be all about fucking each other over. But so it's not really a relationship based on love, I would think.
This is an alternate universe where love doesn't exist. Every character is just trying to fuck every character over.
I know. Kyle-maclachlan, to me, was kind of like the mystery quotient, because and reading about this film and researching, where like he went into it apparently because he was excited about working with Verhoeven, which is understandable. I mean, especially when you see like Verhoeven's earlier work with like Rutger Hauer as an actor. I mean, him being intrigued by that's totally understandable. But I don't understand how he didn't, because apparently he didn't realize how like weird and off the chain everything was going to be until the film debuted. But I mean, knowing the scenes that he's in with Elizabeth-Berkley, I'm kind of like, how did you not know that this was going to be what it was? How would you, he's doing the pool scene and she's flailing about like she just did like 8 tons of PCP and is having a freak out seizure. And he's like, oh, this is a serious good movie. I mean, what was going on in his head? I mean, Kyle-maclachlan seems like a very intelligent man, and he's a great actor. I mean, I'm a fan of Kyle-maclachlan, but I'm a little mystified that he acted like he was, oh, I didn't know it was going to be this bad until it came out. But yeah, no, the guy playing Tony Moss, he was amazing. Yeah, all of the like side characters were really got it. Even the woman playing Mama Bazoom, even though her character annoyed me, because it was basically, to me, her act was like Andrew Dice Clay in drag, which is the, I mean, one Dice Man's enough. We don't need another Dice Man, either in the fictional or real realm. One's enough, But I felt like that actress kind of got, like, a lot of the side people got it.
Penny/Hope, like, she kind of gets it. She plays an airhead so well. Just amazing.
Yeah, I actually felt more sympathy for Penny in this film than I did for Nomi, to be honest with you, because I was like, because she was really, even though like the 5 minutes she's in it, you're like, oh, this poor girl is going to get took. She seems genuinely naive, as opposed to Nomi, who's just, needs to be on some meds or something.
Yeah, it's like even the first time we meet Nomi, when she's out there hitchhiking and gets picked up by the kind of Elvis impersonator looking guy, and she immediately pulls a knife on this dude for what? He's just like kind of flirting with her, and she is just out there loaded for bear. And it almost kind of serves her right when she's so dumb that she leaves the guy with her bag rather than taking it. The one time that she's going to trust somebody and then she gets fucked over. And there's so many quotable lines in this movie, and I want to say like right around there is when the guy comes up to her at the slot machine, and he's like, sooner or later everybody sells it,
That's the movie elbowing you in the ribs. Do you get it?
Yeah. And there's so many of those things right at the beginning of the movie where it's just like, this is what this movie's going to be. And it's like, okay, not subtle at all.
Yeah, it stops just short of, there's a scene near the end when, because Gina-Gershon's character gets pushed down the stairs by Nomi, and so Nomi can take her place in the show, and Molly, Nomi's roommate, is upset because she knows what she did. She knows that she, stabbed someone in the back. And the movie stopped just short of having Molly say, "You've become everything you hate." They showed a little restraint by not having her say that.
And Molly's mad at her for like 5 minutes.
Yeah, the very next scene, they're okay for no reason.
No reason whatsoever. Except that Nomi can introduce Molly to this guy that she has been lusting after through the movie. And I have to say, 2 hours and 11 minutes of this movie, that is just way too long for this thing.
Oh, God. Yeah, that was the thing that I think surprised me. Even when I first watched it years ago, I was like, man, films like this are typically 90 minutes because that's, you can put a lot of action, because it basically is like a B movie with an A movie budget. The weird thing is I get the impression that Eszterhas genuinely believed that he was writing something important, because, I mean, apparently, because even like when this film was getting ready to come out, he like put out ads saying that he was, worried about women being exploited, and that's why he made this film. I'm serious. I mean, and this is why I keep invoking cocaine, not just because it's in the film, but I've to quote, there's a great quote about cocaine because you really are a genius, if you, and I really think he was just probably doing lines and being like, yes, this is the movie, and so it's really just, which makes it even more surreal, because I think he was probably earnest in his own way, which is which is endearing and scary.
Well, and also the story itself is so, I mean, it's the basic, rags to riches kind of, backstabbing people to get to the top story. We've seen this a million times before. So I don't know why the need to make it some grand 2-hour epic.
Yeah, and we get that so early on in that it's so strange. And I know we'll talk about this more after this next break, but there's just all these like weird things where you see them happen twice. And so often you only need to see them happen once. Like the one showgirl who throws down those baubles or whatever and trips up the woman who is Crystal Connor's understudy, her and her partner. And I feel so bad for this woman because it's got to be sometime during the show, maybe towards the beginning of the show, I'm thinking, and she just lays there in pain for the entire thing.
Yeah, they hard cut to the show's over, and there's no one left in the theater, and she's still there.
Still on the stage.
I didn't even think about that.
So we see that backstabbing, and then we see Nomi do it like 15, 20 minutes later, and there's so many times where it's like, God, I don't need it twice. I just need this story to move along, Like, I don't need the whole boat show thing to go on for 20 minutes, And it just feels like there's so many times where it's just like, I want to kick this movie in the ass and be like, get going already. I don't need all of this stuff to show me these. Just give it to me in shorthand. I don't need the paragraph to explain everything.
But no, the great thing about the boat show scene is like, because you have Nomi and one of her coworkers introduced this Japanese businessman, and it's basically all but spelled out that they're expected to entertain him and Phil Newkirk, who is one of Zach's, coworkers, and she gets all mad because she realizes, yes, it's another prostitution situation. The lines are so thin between, pimping and prostitution throughout the whole film, a point that is hammered home very, very often, every 5 minutes, really, throughout the whole 2-hour run. But that Japanese businessman pops back up with the same redheaded coworker, like in the whole party scene where they're Nobi's debut, which is where Molly ends up getting raped. But you see, like in the background, you see that same Japanese businessman with the same redhead, and I just love the idea that she got saddled with this dude for 2 months. I mean, what is the timeline here? It's like, that's a lot of entertainment. I hope that grand was worth it,
Oh, yeah. I hope it's more than just a grand, for the first night and then free the rest of the time. I hope they negotiated a pretty good deal there. All right, let's take another break, and we're going to play an interview with David-Schmader, who does a live presentation of Showgirls that is definitely not to be missed.
Attention, attention. Are you a fan of MASH, one of the most groundbreaking television series in history? Then take a listen to the MASH 4077 podcast, where hosts Kenny, Simon, and Al discuss their thoughts episode by episode. They will also share with you some little-known behind-the-scenes information, trivia, and so much more. So come and find them on iTunes by searching MASH 4077 podcast or online at www.mash4077podcast.com.
Hey folks, have you caught up with See Hear podcast yet? Here are some of the pearls of wisdom that you can hear on a monthly basis. Here's Tim.
How do you get people to take notice anymore, aside from shitting on the floor and rolling around in it and eating it and throwing it at people?
How about Wendy?
I was thinking about this as I was watching. I was thinking about that documentary about Lee Von Helm. Man, drummers are some crotchety-ass people.
What does Sticky have to say?
Anyway, there was some guy in there, and he was kind of peeking into the window, trying to see what this record that was hanging up in the window was. As I was getting closer and closer to him, I realised it was Robert Plant, and he said, I just wanted to check this record out in the window. And I said, sorry mate, you'll have to come back later when I open it.
And I'm rather boring. It sort of became a story about a man trying to promote the music that he loves against the backdrop of other people shooting the asses off each other. You can get the See Hear podcast at seehear.podbean.com. That's SEEHEAR. Or you can find it on iTunes. We discuss music-related films.
This is Adam Spiegelman from the Cult Movie Podcast, Proudly Resents. And you're listening to my favorite movie podcast, The Projection Booth. I know. It's messed up, right?
My name is David-Schmader. I'm a writer and performer, and I just wrapped up. I spent almost 20 years working at an alternative news weekly and just recently left and wrote a book.
Excellent. What's your book?
It is called Weed, A User's Guide.
All the helpful tips and tricks?
Yeah, just like, your cool uncle telling you what to, to clean your bong. How to deal with dealers, all of that. Yeah, I'm in Washington, so it's the hot new world of legal marijuana out here.
Tell me about the first time that you ever saw Showgirls.
Okay, it was 1999. I had ignored it in 95 because I was voting with my dollars, basically, and I wasn't going to support misogynistic crap. I came out during the time of Basic Instinct, so Ver-sayce, had a reputation. So I ignored it on its release, and in 1999, my best friend Mindy, who was like the formative feminist of my life, was like, oh no, you've got to watch Showgirls right now. And she had seen it in a New York screening with the drag queens. So all of this has to go back to like the drag queens that kind of started the campy rediscovery of Showgirls in 99. So she told me to watch it. I rented, I think, a videotape. It was pre-DVD, and like the first 6 minutes, I was like, oh, okay, she's right. This is something incredibly special. It was so surprising the whole way through. Like, movies that try to surprise you in ways are not as, it just delivers on the minute-to-minute level. So I think, that was the first viewing was like, that was incredible, and I think it might be the funniest thing I've ever seen. And I brought friends over and showed it to them, and they agreed. And one of them was on the board of the Northwest Film Forum here, and they said, host a screening here. And that's when it was like, oh, other people see the same thing that I see, and something happens to watch it with a crowd. Like, it's a different experience, and that's how it happened.
It's one thing to enjoy the show and kind of spread it around and everything, but you've definitely have helped bring Showgirls to a different audience, and you've kind of become almost a spokesman for the film.
A little bit. I feel like the drag queens did a lot of the heavy lifting, and I was like, okay, there are people who love art who would never go see this, even if a drag queen told them to, and it was like, people who don't listen to drag queens need to be told to see this movie if they love fascinating American films and accidental comedy. So that was kind of my drive, and I think, and then getting on being called by, when I was doing the first screenings, it was like, I know I'm going to get a cease and desist letter, and I finally got a call from MGM, and it was, come record your, you're right, come record your commentary for the DVD.
What's that like for you when you get this call from MGM? And that must have been such a strange experience.
It was a message. It was just call us back. And I was like, I had a very definite idea of what the call was going to be about. And it was completely based on impending cease and desist. And so I think I was just like gobsmacked that it was not that. And it certainly lended this ridiculous kind of legitimacy to what had been basically like stoner parties of watching a movie.
What you do with the film, I've seen it described as being a interactive lecture / commentary. Is that pretty accurate?
Yeah, how it works is I do like a 6-minute introduction, just to have some key background information and introduce a few themes and framing things to kind of get people ready. But I really want people to see the movie. So especially I've done it for so long, I know exactly what I'm going to say. I don't want anything extraneous. There's this whole level of sassback that I want the audience to have for themselves. Just the kind of the first time you watch Showgirls, all those things you say. And so pretty much what I add is deeper thought on like framing devices and let the movie land on the audience, and they can make their own wisecracks of the kind of just first view level. But I definitely wanted to get it down to as few words as possible because I want people to feel like they've seen Showgirls. So it's not as constant as a lot of other people, and I pick really carefully when I introduce something and then get out of the way so the movie can do its magic.
Now, what's kind of your take on the film? You talked about the framing devices, and what's kind of like your read of the work?
I can tell you this, but there's something like I don't feel like I'm right, and I was actually surprised that like other people saw what I saw and that it turned into a thing. So I thought maybe this was just some weird comedy that hit my G-spot and not everyone's. And my take is that it's just packed with life, funnier. It's funnier than any comedy I've ever seen made on purpose. But definitely, it's a failure. Like, I definitely think that they were going for something and they didn't get it. And the distance between the ambition and the product is key. Like, I could never do this with The Room, because The Room, nobody thought The Room would be good. The Room seems like a really interesting piece of folk art. But Showgirls had the Hollywood money. It came off a blockbuster. It had so much glorious hype. And then we got this beautiful, weird thing at the end. I definitely make fun of Paul Verhoeven and especially Joe Eszterhas. I feel like most of the crimes are his.
The crimes?
I'm overstating, you know. There's a coffee table book that Verhoeven released before the movie called Showgirls, Portrait of a Film. Yeah, and it just has some of his essays about it, and that played into me feeling that was kind of the first insight I got into what they were thinking, because I wanted to know. But yeah, I definitely make fun of it. And
do you like the movie, or do you like the movie ironically? Like, I like a movie like Cool as Ice, but I like it ironically.
By now, it's like I've seen this movie more than any movie I've ever seen. I know every single frame. I know every sound cue. So I love this movie. I feel like we're lucky to have it, because people have tried to make movies as funny and explosively as surprising and mind-twisty as Showgirls on purpose forever. And it can only be created through failure makes it almost the rarest jewel. And especially, like, the bad movie, there's so many bad movies you can barely watch once. Like, who wants to watch Reefer Madness? No one wants to watch Reefer Madness. But a bad movie that delivers all the way through and that you want to watch not just once but forever feels really, like, it delivers negative pleasures as consistently as a masterwork. So does that make it a masterwork?
No, and I think that's the eternal debate. I mean, there was a book that came out recently, Showgirls, It Doesn't Suck.
Uh-huh.
Do you think that it sucks, though? I mean, that's the thing that I want to get to is, do you I asked if you like the movie, but do you think it's a good movie, or is it a bad movie?
No, it's a bad movie. The movie I see is a bad movie, and I'm super fascinated by the people who see something else. It's like we took the same drug and have had completely different experiences. And one is the Showgirls, It Doesn't Suck, and then Film Comment maybe 10 years ago had a Showgirls Roundtable. And it was kind of my first dose of people really applying kind of deep film criticism to it. And I read it all, and I love that they had their experience, but everything, like, I know that the Showgirls It Doesn't Suck goes heavy into the mirror imagery. And it's there, but then all that ends up being evidence of, like, look what was lost because they weren't unable to craft a decent film. All this glorious cinematography, all these series it kind of just makes the failure more valuable to me because so much energy and effort went into it. But I'm never sold. And I don't think there's a right or wrong on this. It's just like, we both had this dream and we took away different morals from it, or had completely different experiences. Because even when people are pointing out what's lyrical about it, or where Verhoeven was going for, it's like, so he could go for that, but he couldn't get a script, or he couldn't find a lead actress. Like, but there's great care shown in some ways, and then complete disregard for craft and continuity and sense other places.
Putting Showgirls kind of into some context when it comes to some of Verhoeven and Eszterhas's other works. I mean, obviously they had worked together before with Basic Instinct, which, again, I think could be considered like I don't know if I want to say glorious failure. Obviously, it made a lot of money at the box office, but to me, there's some of that sleaze that then plays into something like a Showgirls. Are you a fan of Verhoeven's other works?
I never really took the plunge, and I understand I need to see Spetters and see some of his European work and get a sense of that, and I have just never done it. I've seen Starship Troopers and Basic Instinct, and I agree with you about Basic Instinct. There was something about, I saw it after Showgirls, but the dialogue, just the kind of 13-year-old naughty boy dialogue between grown-up detectives about sex, and you're like, oh, I cannot really speak to this as, like, Verhoeven's oeuvre.
When you're showing Showgirls to an audience, what are the parts that kill? What are the things that still to this day are going to get the audience just whooping and hollering?
Well, of course, the pool scene, like it turns into like a rugby rally. It's insane. That was very exciting to see, just an audience go through that with her, where just like stomping feet with every thrust of her hips, and I didn't expect that. And then there are like the amazing gems of the screenplay. So robert-davi soulfully turning around and gazing, and must be weird not having anybody come on you. No one can believe that. I just silently rewind it. The silent rewind is my favorite thing, because I'm hidden. They don't see where I am. And there are some things you're like, your brain doesn't believe you just saw that. So I just rewind it really quickly and show it again. Oh, the Spago scene. The Spago scene is the great one. The kind of fake Pinter dialogue about brown rice and vegetables and doggy chow. It's like Pinter, but there's no subtext from outer space. So those are kind of the gems. And I skip the rape scene, and that always gets a lot of applause. That's very contentious to the people who are like, you're robbing it of its power. I'm like, fuck you. Or you're talking to me about preserving the integrity of Showgirls. I'm going to shoot you out of a cannon.
So how does this experience then translate to the DVD? You were on the VIP edition of Showgirls, which I think now might be out of print for a little bit. I don't know if there's been talk about bringing that back out for the Blu-ray.
It's actually on the Blu-ray. They just called it Showgirls Fully Loaded. They just changed the name. And yeah, the VIP was that big box set with the pin the pasties on the Showgirls and shot glasses and stuff. And then that became the smaller, fully loaded edition. So yes, you can still get it. And I'm happy that people like that I got some really good reviews for that, like internationally, which was strange because it was by far the goofiest thing I'd done. But it seemed on the DVD, I just kind of talk all the way through it, and it's not, I can't pause, I can't rewind, so I much prefer the live version. I feel like that's what it really is, but apparently the commentary track does enough that, like, lots of people like it, and it does the trick, but it was very different because it was just a straight shot.
Have you ever gotten a chance to talk to any of the people involved? Do they ever do, like, with Rocky Horror, you'll have, like, Susan Sarandon will show up for a screening, those kind of things?
Yeah, the Rena Riffel and I are very chummy online, and we've tried to do stuff together, but she has a very complicated life. But the person who kind of gave me the most feedback was Kyle-maclachlan, Seattle International Film Festival. He came to town for like a lifetime achievement thing, and I interviewed him for my job at the Stranger newspaper, and I wasn't going to bring up Showgirls. I didn't want to be the jerk who was like, ugh. But he brought it up, and I was thrilled, and he kind of was ready to talk, and he shot down any kind of revisionist interpretation that this was meant as camp, and he was like, the direction we were doing he just told me about how the actors were directed and what they were told, and that it was very much a weighty psychodrama. And he also said, yeah, I was like, I would have never asked you this, but I'm so glad you were up for talking about this. And then he just said that the pool scene, holding on to her, was extremely hard to do with a sexy face. Like, keeping the physics of that scene. So I was so happy with his generosity. And then I feel like I learned a lot from Hollywood Animal, Joe Eszterhas's autobiography or memoir, where Gina-Gershon just kind of talks a lot about how green Elizabeth-Berkley was, that, basically she'd spent her whole life on a show with a laugh track where you could, like, turn to the camera and make a joke, and all of a sudden she was starring in this major film. She kind of talked about having to give her some remedial acting lessons mid-shoot, like between takes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The campiest thing I heard about it, and this was from, like, people in New York theater and the kind of gossip that gets thrown around for who knows if it's true, but the scene where Naomi has kind of, she's bottomless, but she's wearing glitter in her pubis, so she's kind of wearing glitter for a bottom, and they stopped shooting. She and Verhoeven went into a trailer, and Verhoeven came out with glitter in his beard. So So this is the kind of acting training they were, direction she was getting according to some lore. But Kyle-MacLachlan is my best one-on-one.
He must be a great interview.
He was really sweet and just ready to go. He was also here to just be completely celebrated. That must be a great situation where it's not promoting something. It's like, you exist and we love you. It was nice.
So much of the film, lives and dies on the performance of Elizabeth-Berkley, and so risky to put her in such a huge role for not having that much experience.
That's when I get most into the idea that Verhoeven is a secret genius who was spoofing America and giving us exactly the quality this country deserves. It's like, oh my God, there's something to like casting Elizabeth-Berkley in that movie is like electing Donald Trump president. There's this mirror image of American recklessness in it. But you're right, so much. That's all my cues that this is not a serious endeavor come from what she's allowed to do on film, even in the first scene. That's kind of where all my certainty, whatever certainty I have about no, this is a bad movie that is fun, is a lot of what her performance was allowed to be by her director.
You mentioned the term camp, and that gets thrown around a lot, especially when it comes to this film. But I'm curious, you having your background working at The Strange and everything, you're obviously very well read and everything, but to you, what is your take when it comes to camp? Because that word seems to have picked up many different meanings for many different people over the years.
Yeah, I kind of stay away from it because some people have a really, really specific meaning, and then other people have a really loosey-goosey, so bad it's good, wash meaning. So I kind of just pay attention to how other people use it. I guess I defer to the second one where it's just so bad it's good. But I guess the matter is, the big division is intent. You can't be camp on purpose, apparently, and which I guess I agree with. But yeah, camp seems almost as identity politicized as trans in some ways, so I kind of just stay out of it and defer to what people like. But is there a more specific angle I could answer to about that?
No, I don't think so. Like I said, I think everybody has their own reading. Even if they go back to the Sontag, everybody still comes away with it with something else.
It's true.
Seems like one of the most open to interpretation essays ever.
I'm going to use it to, defund schools. I don't know. Find some new way to use that argument.
Did you say that you were coming out right around the time of Basic Instinct?
Yes. So that was kind of my, so that was ACT UP picketing Basic Instinct for making, it was Silence of the Lambs and Basic Instinct, and it was the season of gay killers. I think that's what scared me off Showgirls too, of just don't spend 2 hours watching this.
Once you went back and watched Basic Instinct, what were your feelings about it?
By the time I watched it, Ellen had a TV show, and we knew, and she hadn't killed anyone yet. And her ratings were doing fine, even without murder. So the political part was a wash for me. I was like, oh, this has as much to do with actual lesbians as porn with where the lesbians treat each other like they're made out of glass and they have long fingernails. It seemed totally like a guy fantasy of lesbianism, which kind of squared with Showgirls too. But other than that, I was mostly shocked at just the really crass and crude dialogue. And once again, it goes back to Eszterhas as much as anything, but just the way the investigators were talking in the room of the sexy murder at the beginning was just oh, this is what 13-year-olds think grown-ups talk like. I was pretty dazzled because it mostly with that one, because that one was a hit. That's the movie that made Showgirls possible. Showgirls flopped, but that was enough. That had something. It might have just been that central performance. It's such a good performance from Sharon Stone. And definitely, that's what I took away. I was like, oh, that's a movie about A Star is Born as an actor. I wonder if that's just what made the difference as far as public perception of just having an identifiable or even desirable protagonist, even in this kind of camp or crappy, trashy movie. And with Showgirls, we never got a hook. Who did you root for? I guess Molly, but, every black person in that movie is totally subservient.
It's funny that you say A Star is Born, because I know Showgirls keeps being compared now to either All About Eve or even Gold Diggers of, 33, I think it might be. So it's I don't know if we could really take that seriously as far as these previous films kind of being turned on their head by Verhoeven, I can see the what you're talking about with The Star Is Born, with not a literal thing.
Right. No, it's more just about like, oh, Sharon Stone got the role of a lifetime and ate it up and was great. And I feel like Gina-Gershon is the closest we get to that in Showgirls, someone who kind of is like, I'm in this and I'm going to come out a winner no matter what. I don't care about anyone else in this thing.
Going back to Eszterhas, there are times in Showgirls where it almost feels like a porn film as far as some of the climaxes that happen throughout it. It almost feels like he was writing his Penthouse Forum screenplay kind of thing. Yeah. During the press tour, they were really blasé about like, oh, our research was just getting a lot of lap dances. And yeah, they didn't, it all just kind of seemed like they were kind of exploiting whatever power and privilege they got because of their surprise hit to just have the time of their lives. And they're kind of creepy, gross men, and the time of their life is not what I would consider fun. But yeah, they seemed, their leering was a big part of it. And I feel that that's in the movie too. I think that what you're saying with the highly dramatic sex scenes and like, what man wouldn't want to imagine that when you stick it in a lady, she has a complete full body panic attack? And that's how it works, man. I just remember the lap dance scene in the pool that you're talking about. It looked like it hurt, man. Yeah. I would not want to experience that. That's the thing. That's kind of where I'm happy that Showgirls failed, because if that had been a big hit, that could have warped a generation of boys about like, no, I know what good sex looks like, and it's the Showgirls pool scene, and the emergency rooms would have filled up with people trying to replicate it. So where can people find out more about this new book, and where can people kind of catch up with you? Google David-Schmader, and my book will be out on 4/20, and that's kind of the big thing.
And we're back, and we're talking about Showgirls. Have either one of you had the chance to check out the trivia track that's on the DVD edition of Showgirls?
I actually bought the DVD of Showgirls just for the Schmader commentary. We just heard from David Schmader, and for that trivia track, because I wanted to know what that was all about. Did you guys watch pop-up videos back in the day?
Absolutely.
Occasionally, I remember it.
It was very pop-up videos, but at the same time, it didn't have the little sound effects, which I kind of missed. And it was also timed really bad. So, like, I'm a pretty quick reader. English is my first language, believe it or not. But I could not make it through most of those bubbles by the time they disappeared off the screen. I'm just like, wait, what? If it was more than 5 or 6 words, I'm like, okay, oh, bam, it's gone. So I kept having to rewind and rewatch. So my experience of watching Showgirls last night was more like 2:45 rather than 2:11. So yeah, it made it a little bit more excruciating. Just trust me on that one.
I had the trivia track on. I was kind of half paying attention to it. I only saw the first half of it or so, but some of them were really bizarre. Like there was one in the back room at the strip club where Robert-Davi is saying something about like fucking someone or something like that. And the trivia track that came up was like Robert-Davi fucks Teresa because that's his wife's name, or something really like weird and skeezy like that.
That is totally that pop-up video type thing. And especially like they'll give you like weird factoids, and then like who was in all of the Saved by the Bell episodes, and then they, kind of give an ellipsis, and then Nomi screams, and it says Screech as the thing. So it's like, oh, okay. So yeah. when I was talking to David Schmader, he made reference to the book Showgirls, It Doesn't Suck. So I want to ask you guys, and we've talked about this a little bit as far as this whole idea of Verhoeven being a very, very smart filmmaker and being very subversive, being able to, take a movie like Starship Troopers and makes this wonderful, to me, work of art with it. RoboCop, same kind of thing. Showgirls, I was really, like I said at the beginning, I was hoping for like new set of eyes coming into this and being able to see this really kind of subversive thing that I missed before. So I want to ask you guys, do you consider Showgirls to be purely trash, a little bit of class, or maybe more than just that? Or do you see this kind of infiltration of ideas that Verhoeven is kind of famous for?
I think this movie, to me, it's like there are elements that actually I will say I think are really great about it. Like on a technical level, I think it's beautifully shot, and the lighting, the cinematography, those aspects as far as cinema goes are on point. It's a beautiful to look at film. I mean, even the makeup, everything is very eye-catching and very Vegas. Everything reflects sort of the false glitz and glamour of that town. So that's done really well. And the soundtrack actually is really good. And the soundtrack's really strange, though, because it's like you have artists, like, yeah, Prince pops up, but then you have, like, a couple of My Life with the Thrill Kill Cult, songs come up, and Susie and the Banshees and Sisters of Mercy. It's basically like a mixtape I would have made when this movie came out. To me, just the real crux of it's the writing. I mean, the writing is really, I really wish they would have just had a different, screenwriter than Eszterhas. I mean, and I do think the film's actually entertaining. I'm not, as far as film as entertainment goes, I think it does succeed. Would I call it classy? Only classy. It's shot well, but no, it's not. Come on, it's not classy.
What do you think, Jay? Do you like it more than a 10-inch dick?
Oh, Jesus. Well, I can definitely say yes in that regard, but my feelings on the movie are so all over the place, just like the movie. I feel like for the most part, it's sort of a failed satire. I don't think it's so bad it's hilarious, like some people do. But I don't think it's really worthy of critical reappraisal like some other people do. There's elements that I like Heather mentioned, the technical aspects. It's a good looking movie, and some of the dialogue is so bizarre. It feels like it was written by Tommy Wiseau, like the doggy chow scene where they're talking about how they ate doggy chow when they were kids, and you're like, that's one of those things where it's like it's clearly going for something campy, but then other elements aren't. Like it doesn't seem to go enough in either way of being campy, tongue-in-cheek, or being some sort of smart satire. It's a biting Hollywood satire without the Hollywood or the satire. It's like you replace the glitz and glamour of Hollywood with Vegas. And we were talking earlier about like parallels in the movie, and the one that actually makes sense in the story is first of all, it's funny that they're having press conferences and there's all this media coverage for a Vegas topless show, but you have Crystal Connors, right? Crystal Connors, and they're giving her all this media attention, and at the end, Nomi's getting that same media attention. So it's like, okay, I get what they're doing, but the movie's 2 hours, and in between the bizarre dialogue, there's just lots of kind of boring scenes.
I've had dog food.
You have?
Mm-hmm. Long time ago. Doggy chow. Oh, I used to love doggy chow.
I used to love doggy chow too.
I really picked up after reading It Doesn't Suck. I picked up on seeing some of the things like the doubling of the press conference, the doubling of the lap dance / sex scenes, which we've talked about before. The one thing that I actually didn't necessarily pick up from the book, but really more from watching a little video essay about the way that African American characters are treated in Starship Troopers, was just the way that, because we have two African-American characters are very prominent in this movie. We've got Molly and James Smith. I'm sure it took Eszterhas forever to come up with a name as complicated as that. But just the way that they're kind of positioned in this movie, and we've talked about how everybody wants to help out Nomi, even though she has no right to being helped. And these two, I think, are the ones that help her out the most and are trying to be the most sincere. Especially Molly is the most sincere when it comes to this, because Molly takes her in, well, buys her food that's not dog food, saves her life from traffic, takes her and introduces her to Crystal and to the whole Showgirls world, because Molly kind of works behind the scenes. It's interesting. There's only one other black character that I can think of off the top of my head, and that's the one who gets, kind of in that unfortunate sabotage type accident. But Molly's there doing all this stuff, studying, getting her degree, all this kind of stuff. And then she expresses her love of this guy, Andrew Carver, who is down with Zach. Like we see, like it's weird how this Andrew Carver thing comes in, because we've got her seeing a picture of him on the strip. When later we see a picture of Carver with Kyle-maclachlan, and then finally at this, as you said, Jay, the coming out party for Nomi Malone, that's when she finally meets him. And that is the most violent and upsetting scene. I mean, not just for this film, but it is one of the most violent and unsettling scenes I've seen in a movie in a long damn time.
Yeah, and that's part of why I have trouble viewing this as like a so bad it's funny movie, because that scene is like you said, it's really brutal, and it's also confusing, because this Molly is very clearly willing to give herself over to this guy. So I guess he just has a fetish for beating women. I don't understand what that scene's supposed to be, and it also doesn't work. Like, is that scene supposed to tell us that anything new that we don't already know? Like, we already know that this town is full of scumbags.
Yeah, and it's not him raping her; it's his boys that are raping her, which is just kind of strange too. His two bodyguards and him, they're just like cheering them on and stuff. God, it turns my stomach.
It's a really uncomfortable scene.
Oh
yeah, no, that is one nasty rape scene, and it's weird because, I mean, like you said, Jay, tonally it does not fit in with the rest of the film, because the rest of the film is this sort of like glittery, campy, strange kind of film, and so in the middle of this you have this, like, all of a sudden it's like, I spit on your grave, and it doesn't make sense. It totally does not work with the rest of the film, and so brutal, and I mean, she's bloody, and it's awful. It is probably one of the nastier ones I've seen, and I mean, as this is somebody who's studied like 60s roughies, and I've seen some things, but this was pretty gross. And in the middle of this like light, glitzy, campy movie, I mean, it doesn't make sense tonally, and also to have the one character that actually probably is the closest thing to a likable human being in this movie get that kind of punishment seems very weird.
And if you're going to rape somebody like that at a party, you might want to like lock them in or take them somewhere and dump them off or something. You just don't let them walk around at the party afterwards.
Yeah, she just stumbles on out.
The one thing I thought was sort of interesting in a disturbing way was apparently that scene, Eszterhas was inspired. He had read about something very similar happening when he worked at Rolling Stone.
Ooh.
Yeah. So, and in light of the whole Bill Cosby thing, and it's weird. People do turn a blind eye to that. I mean, I remember hearing an interview on the Rialto Report with Sharon Kelly, where she was talking about being at a party where Roman Polanski was in attendance, and he had like a young girl with him, and she was passed out, and he disappeared with her, and nobody really did or said anything.
Oh man.
But again, if it was handled by a smarter script writer, that could be kind of the moment of like, this is the big ugly, like if you had a writer who was better than Eszterhas, who could do something that actually truly is dark and biting, well, then it could work. It could have worked, but not Eszterhas. I mean, the man's best known for Flashdance. Come on, like this is not going to be a cat that's going to be able to pull off, the end of the line kind of vibe and tonality that this film, that I think Verhoeven may have wanted, Or maybe he didn't. I don't know. It's such a weird beast, this film.
Mike, you said you listened to the commentary track for this, right? And that's the guy that is a big proponent of the movie being funny, right?
Right.
During that sequence, does he just go dead silent?
From what I understand, they actually skip that when they show it.
Oh,
so I think that's
there you go.
Probably the best thing that you can possibly do.
That's the closest we'll get to a fan edit of Showgirls.
Yeah, you just hit the fast forward button and off you go. Because, that's the moment, man, where you're just like, oh, it's so painful. And, it just totally turns the movie such a different way. And it's in moments like that where I'm just like, oh, yeah, Verhoeven did The Invisible Man or The Hollow Man, too. I forgot all about that. That was pretty fucking dark and not very good either.
Yeah, well, you have Jennifer Jason Leigh in Flesh and Blood who gets raped as well. So Verhoeven was definitely not afraid to delve into some very dark territories, but in Flesh and Blood it makes sense. Showgirls not so much,
Well, yeah, and especially with this movie, if they're going for camp or if they're going for something satirical, that just completely stops the movie dead in its tracks.
Yeah, at least with James, James is the other African-American character who is really trying to help Nomi out for no good reason whatsoever. Maybe he wants to have sex with her, but he really doesn't get into it that much. And,
well, he definitely wants to have sex with her.
Oh, and the abuse that this woman pours onto him. I mean, he loses 2 jobs over her. He loses however much money bailing her out of jail. He gets kneed severely in the groin by her. And it's just, it's terrible what this guy goes through. And he ends up with Penny, who then ends up pregnant. And basically, it feels like, okay, that's the end of his days being a choreographer. And he's just going to go on to whatever kind of menial job he can possibly get. So I feel kind of bad for James. At least he doesn't get gang raped. That's the best I can say about James.
He just kind of leaves the movie at that point. Poochie went back to his home planet. That entire subplot really doesn't have much to do with anything, and it doesn't inform the Nomi character at all. She has no arc or growth or any sort of revelations based on what James goes through.
I can't even understand his most famous line when he just says,
"Man, everybody got AIDS and shit."
It's like, what the fuck is he talking about? Because he's talking about the lap dance that he saw Nomi give to Zach with Crystal there. But I don't understand why he has to bring up everybody having AIDS and shit when they're having probably the safest sex you can possibly have, other than Zach getting bruises and possibly some fractures going on.
Yes, you cannot get AIDS through dry humping. Let that be known. Well, this film, but again, it's like this. The logic in this film just makes no sense. I mean, we're talking a universe where 2 women who hate each other are bonding over eating dog food. I mean, this is what women talk about: dog food and nails and titties and here's another thing. How come there's multiple scenes where you have women eating a good amount of carbs and then immediately goes into dancing? I mean, anybody who's tried to work out after eating a full meal knows that's a bad idea. And dancers, I mean, come on, dancers are eating hamburgers and French fries. I mean, they're living off of cocaine and Tic Tacs. I mean, that's not totally true. That's not totally true. But I mean, I don't know. This universe, the Showgirls universe, it might as well be a science fiction film as far as how close it is to any sort of reality on this planet.
Brown rice and vegetables. That's what they keep saying everybody eats, even though everybody just eats cheeseburgers.
Cheeseburgers and spagos and puppy chow.
I love puppy chow. It's so good, darling.
Darlin. Go put on your Ver-sayce. Get your nails done, eat some dog food, and you too can recreate the glamour of Showgirls. And hopefully get to have a boss as beautifully sleazy as Robert-davi. So.
I guess that's the thing about the Zach character that he's so strange to me, because half the time he's really genuinely nice, like telling Nomi how to properly pronounce Ver-sayce, kind of, joking around about his MBA, this kind of stuff, calling on his huge cell phone. But then the rest of the time he's doing all these underhanded things. So he could be probably the most complicated character of the film, but he's just such an enigma at the end of the day. I get nothing from him.
What you call complicated, I call bad writing.
Okay. I accept that.
It's complicatedly bad writing, I think, is what what we're dealing with.
He's whatever is needed for any individual scene.
And it shouldn't be that complicated. I mean, we've seen this story before. We've seen the story of the ingenue who comes in and wants that big role in the thing, and there's someone in her way. Whether she takes that person out through subterfuge or whether it's just luck of the draw or something happens. I mean, this is like classic Hollywood. We're going all the way back to, 42nd Street with Ruby Keeler, who ends up being in that prominent role. And it's not that complicated of a story, but Showgirls is. Showgirls just goes so many places it doesn't necessarily need to go. I mean, just with the James Smith character, he doesn't add anything to the proceedings.
No, well, I think part of it is sort of the weird it's Eszterhas. It's the weird influences, because I know he's gone on record saying that All About Eve was an influence, which I can definitely see, kind of, on some superficial levels. One film that makes me think that I feel like he watched and won't cop to, possibly, is Ted V. Michael's Girl in Gold Boots, which Hollywood has always had a big tradition of kind of watching like B movies and kind of refurbishing them and never claiming them. Like, again, another Michael's film, The Doll Squad, basically is like Charlie's Angels, but it came out before Charlie's Angels. So Girl in Gold Boots has a similar plot. We have a girl who has a troubled, family history, who wants to just go off and dance. And she ends up, hitching a ride and going to Hollywood, and, ends up becoming like a background dancer, and then gets sucked into the world of drugs and seediness and slimy men. And then ultimately gets out of the scene because it's just, she realized what a mess it was. The difference is the character in Girl in Gold Boots is actually, I mean, the actress is beautiful. She's not the best actress in the world, but her character at least has like moral compunction. Like she won't steal, and she ultimately isn't Machiavellian, unlike Nomi or like All About Eve. But there is like a similarity. But actually, Girl in Gold Boots is a little more entertaining because it's shorter. and you have lots of go-go dancing in gold bikinis. I mean, what's not to love with that?
Well, where do go-go dancers fit on that continuum that I outlined before? Are they above showgirls? Are they below showgirls? Are they below prostitutes? I mean, somebody's got to point me in the right direction, because I really didn't know until I watched Showgirls that there was this huge strata between all of these positions that a woman can hold.
All the details are fleshed out in the Showgirls appendices.
Oh, okay. The Silmarillion of Showgirls?
Yes.
I think go-go dancers are above strippers, because most of the time they keep their clothes on. They might not be wearing a lot of them, but they're below showgirls because there's not as much pageantry and fanciness.
Okay.
That's just my personal approximation. So.
Well, I think it's time that we heard another opinion here. So we're going to take another break and play an interview with Adam-nayman, the author of It Doesn't Suck, An Appreciation of Showgirls.
My name is Adam-nayman. I'm a film critic based in Toronto. I'm a contributing editor to a Canadian film magazine called CinemaScope, and I write for a number of other publications in Canada and the States. And I'm an instructor at the University of Toronto in the not a member of the faculty, but I teach in the Cinema Studies department.
When was the first time you saw Showgirls?
The first time I saw Showgirls was when I was 14, when it came out in 1995. I was not legally permitted to see it, but nothing is going to get between an enterprising teenager and, his R-rated movie. So I saw it here in Toronto when it opened, and then probably saw it again pretty quickly after it came out on home video the next year.
What was your initial impression?
I think a lot of 14-year-old boys were hoping to sneak into Showgirls, but I might have been one of the only ones who was doing it because it had gotten 0 stars at the Globe and Mail, which is Canada's national paper. I mean, I've always, even since I was just a teenager, been really interested in film criticism and in reception, and even in a kind of, not pre-internet exactly, but certainly like internet was a more limited thing there. There's no such thing as social media. And even then, you could hear, whether it was on like talk shows or reading it in the newspaper, or what even like kids were talking about at school, was that this film was just a disaster, right? I mean, I was interested in seeing why people hated it so much. And of course, you know, like I suspected that probably the reason people thought that this was bad was also because it seemed like a pretty extreme movie, you know? Like it's not like I didn't know what it was or what it was about when I went to see it. But I was going to see it because it had gotten such bad reviews.
When did you come up with the idea of writing a book about Showgirls?
At the University of Toronto, when I did my master's, I did a project. My thesis was on Verhoeven, but it was actually on his Dutch films. And that wasn't because I was unfamiliar with the American ones. It was just that I thought that, you know, accounting for this guy's sensibility and style as a director and using the Dutch films as the prism to look at him through, you know, seemed like a more original topic. But my advisor there always sort of would make notes on my paper during our meetings and say, you know, you obviously keep trying to bring the American movies into the study of the Dutch movies. And you know, I had sort of found that there were a couple of his Dutch films, one he made in the 70s called Kadi Tippel, and one he made far more recently, a film called Black Book in 2006, that the heroines of those films and the stories of those films were very reflective of Showgirls. And so, you know, that plus the fact that I have just always liked Showgirls and been a fan of it meant that, you know, in the back of my mind I thought, well, it might be a kind of a fun challenge or an not attention getting, but like a conspicuous thing to do, a notable thing to do to try and defend that movie. And then ECW Press, a Canadian publisher, decided that they were going to start this series of pop culture monographs. And I think probably within 45 minutes of someone sending me that Twitter link or that Facebook link about the series, I had sort of crafted a pitch. And as I was crafting the pitch, sort of realizing how credible it seemed, like, this is a great idea for a book. This is a movie that everyone's heard of, a movie that everyone knows, and a movie that a lot of those people would probably be interested in reading or finding out how someone might frame it positively.
And what was ECW's response?
They loved it. My two editors there, Chrissy Calhoun and Jennifer Noach, they met with me. I was the first author in the series. They've subsequently published four more titles, you know, which have done well. They were obviously looking for something off the top that was sort of notable, and I really commended them at the time because it's a Toronto-based publisher, and I'm a Toronto-based writer, but Showgirls is obviously not a Canadian film in any way. And so, you know, often in Canada there's pressure, you know, in the arts or in publishing to talk about Canadian culture, to talk about Canadian film, and people should do that. But in this case, they were very receptive, even as a Canadian publisher, to the idea of this kind of American movie. And I think it's because they knew what a good fit it was. That the combination of like a conspicuously famous or infamous movie and a book length of about 120 pages, which is like long enough to do a detailed argument, but you're not writing a 400-page novel about it. I think they recognized that this was a good idea, and you know, I think that they were right. I think it worked out really well as a first book for their series, and I hope it worked out well as a book.
So you're very familiar with Verhoeven's work. You're talking about his Dutch films primarily in your thesis, and you come to Showgirls with this history and everything. How was it when you tried to tackle this film that had been ridiculed for so many years?
It wasn't that I was looking for an angle of approach. There were so many different angles of approach that I had a hard time narrowing down which one to take. I mean, there's the whole question of the film's reception and, why do some films get really bad reviews? I mean, obviously the answer is sometimes because they deserve them or people think that they deserve them, but there was a whole sense, I think, in the mid-90s that, critics were really fed up with the extremity, the sexual extremity in the films Verhoeven had made and the films written by Joe Eszterhas. So I think to some extent, their luck kind of ran out. And that was one of the things that I wanted the book to be about, the idea of why this film, which is just as outrageous and satirical and entertaining as something like Basic Instinct, which was a huge hit. So why Basic Instinct was a hit and Showgirls was a flop. The question of Verhoeven as an auteur and sort of locating certain themes, certain traits in his characters and in his storytelling, starting in the 70s was definitely part of it. I thought just writing in general about the depiction of sex in American film. I thought writing about musicals, because Showgirls is it's very closely patterned after old musicals, backstage musicals, films like Gold Diggers of 1933 and 42nd Street. And, Verhoeven even said that at the time, not that anyone paid attention, but that those films and a movie like All About Eve by Joseph Mankiewicz were sort of some of the movies that he was inspired by. And then there was the whole angle of performance with Elizabeth-Berkley and the question of, can a great movie have a bad performance in it, or is it only a great movie because it's a bad performance? Is it even a bad performance? And so I knew that there was going to be a ton of stuff to write about, and if anything, I was just searching around for the right framework or the right question to ask first that would then permit me to ask all those other questions.
So what was that central question? What came to you to help you unlock this mystery?
Well, this is where I'm always happy to talk about this part because it's a really nice experience, which is there's a French director named Mia Hansen-Love. I would hesitate to, just because it's such a general term, but I mean, I would say she's an art filmmaker, or she makes films that in North America would be considered art house fare. She made a film this past year called Eden. And when I met Mia, it was 3 or 4 years ago when they were doing a retrospective of her films in Toronto, and we had dinner. And she's around my age. She's really acclaimed French filmmaker, one of the most well-regarded younger French directors today. And we found that we had a lot of movies in common. I found that she was a big fan of Showgirls. I had just sort of found out I was going to write this book. And she told me that there was going to be a scene in her new movie Eden where characters talked about Showgirls. It's a film about the birth of electronic dance music in France. It's actually about based on her brother's life, and her brother was friends with the guys in Daft Punk. Anyway, the movie dramatizes all that. But there was a scene in her script where characters watch Showgirls because it's the 90s when it's set, and they watch it on home video. And she was very kind. She sent me those pages. She sent me that script, even though she hadn't even started shooting the movie yet. And the discussion that the characters in her script had about whether it was good, whether it was bad, whether they enjoyed watching it, they were so funny and so articulate on the page that if you read the book, that screenplay excerpt really is like the basis of the inquiry of the whole book. And I thank Mia and I cite the script. And so coming out the other side, last fall, after the book had already come out, I went to finally see Eden at the Toronto International Film Festival, and I saw it at a press screening. And the scene was in the movie, and it was exactly the same as it had been in my book. And it was so surreal to see this sequence, which had been part of this argument I was making critically, suddenly now be acted on screen by actors. And I happened to be sitting with a lot of friends, other writers who read my book or knew that Mia's scene was in there. It was probably one of the most surreal film-going experiences of my life, just those 5 minutes of Eden. It was like I was watching the film version of my book. It was really strange. But yeah, Mia's generosity in sending me that script and her decision to just have characters debate Showgirls and debate it on the grounds of taste and auteurism and artistic intention really gave me an in. So I don't know. I mean, I would have written a book regardless, but I really don't think it would have been this book without that interaction.
So what were some of the things that you discovered as you were kind of unwrapping Showgirls?
Well, what I discovered, or what I rediscovered, and I think what a lot of people who've now watched the film in accordance with my book, like at the screenings we did in Toronto and New York to promote the book, what they've discovered or rediscovered is that Showgirls is an extremely well-made film. I'm now not talking about its plot or its themes or its acting or its dramaturgy or anything like that, but that, Verhoeven is a really, he had a lot of resources at the time too. He's just a really good visual storyteller. His cutting's really great. I mean, it's a long movie, but it doesn't feel long. And I sort of felt that, when you're going through the movie sort of scene by scene, almost minute by minute, taking notes and then determining, what you're going to focus on, I just found that there were so many things I wanted to talk about formally, or so many things I wanted to talk about in terms of camera work, and that was very funny to me, because here I am writing a book about a film that working film critics at the time had said was totally inept on every level. And I guess what I discovered was how disingenuous I think a lot of that writing was, where it's fine if people at the time didn't like Elizabeth-Berkley's acting, or they thought the movie was exploitative, or they thought the dialogue was dumb. I mean, I think that there's something to be said for all of those points. Elizabeth-Berkley, maybe her performance is bad, maybe the film's dialogue is dumb, it is a sleazy movie. But when you read these reviews, and critics are also saying, and it's so badly shot, and it drags on, and it's, terrible movie making, when you're looking at the movie, you're like, well, it's just not true. I work as a film critic. Taste is subjective. You can't tell someone they're wrong about how they feel about a movie, but I guess when it comes to form and when it comes to craft, I think there is such a thing as having a more educated or a more objective view of that stuff. And I sort of, it was really encouraging to me going through the movie again, now not watching it as an entertainment or as a story, but breaking it down into its component parts and just seeing how purposeful, how intentional, how sort of rigorous the filmmaking was in it. Made me feel like I had a solid foundation to then maybe try and reclaim or rehabilitate some of the stuff on top of that.
How was the book received when it came out?
It was mostly pretty well reviewed. I think what a lot of people did was they took this as an opportunity to write what they've always thought about Showgirls, which is fine. Ideally, that's what a good book or a good essay does, or a good book review or a good essay that a book does, is it uses the book as an opportunity to talk about some larger stuff. You don't want to review the book where you're like, I like this sentence, I don't like this sentence. The reviews that I liked were the ones. And I got reviewed in The Atlantic, and they sort of used it to talk about sort of sex work, or, if it's possible that Showgirls is satirical, but it also maybe reinforces negative attitudes about sex workers, because you find out Nomi's characters are prostitutes. So that was interesting. I got a really kind review in Slate. I couldn't believe that it got mentioned, not full reviews, but like the book got mentioned in the New York Times, it got mentioned in the Paris Review, it got mentioned in Vanity Fair in a piece by James Wolcott. And I think, while I'd like to think that has to do with the fact that I wrote a good book, it's because the movie is so conspicuous, the movie is so infamous, that I think anytime a writer or an editor hears, and someone's written a whole book about it, they sort of want to mention that, right? And I did lectures about the film here in Toronto. I did an intro for it at Lightbox, the Tiff Bell Lightbox, as part of their Verhoeven retrospective. It's a sold-out screening. And I guess, I say this because I think it's a good thing. I think if there were like 400 people there, I don't think even half of them really knew that they were there because there was a book, right? Like they were just going to see Showgirls because it's fun to go see Showgirls. And actually, I remember when I was doing my opening remarks with the director, the artistic director of the Lightbox, or the head programmer of the Lightbox, I had a lot of friends there, and there obviously people came out because of the book. I was selling books there. But I saw this one guy in the front row while I was talking, just going, I saw him talking to his friend, and I could hear what he said. He was saying to his friend, blah, 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 start the movie, I guess my point is that the book was well received, but the people in 2015 don't need a book or don't need the discourse around a book to want to go see a revival showing of Showgirls. This has been a big, successful, popular cult movie in the sort of repertory circle or the midnight movie circle for 20 years now. And so while I tried to write about that in the book, it's also just nice to discover now that I'm touring this book or talking about this book, people will just go see Showgirls anyway, and they don't need a book to tell them that they're supposed to like it.
Do you think that they're seeing it more in like the Room type instance, or more like a genuine good film that is a midnight movie circuit film?
Oh, it's a great question, and I think I don't mean for this to be a cop-out answer. I think that the answer is that, some do, some don't. I think that when Showgirls was first remounted or recirculated, it was a sort of thing like The Room long before The Room even existed. The screenings that the film would have in New York or in Los Angeles or San Francisco at the beginning were very sort of culty, ironic, sort of laugh at the movie kind of screenings. But at a certain point, when the community or a set of rituals develops around a film, people aren't really going there to watch it because they hate it. They're going there to watch it because they like it. And who's to say that there's the right way to like a movie? I think that there's a lot of affection for Showgirls in those screenings, even if it's laced with a bit of contempt or maybe a bit of disbelief. But I think more and more now you'll see the film written about or screened or programmed more in line with the idea that it's an auteur film, or more in line with the idea that it's a misunderstood film. I mean, one of the things I would say about my book is that if I'd written this book 10 years ago, then, hey, maybe it would have showed that I really had a lot of guts, or that I was really on to something unique, Oh, my God, a guy writing a book about Showgirls in 2005 or something. But by 2015, if anything, my argument is not that hard to make. I think you would be hard-pressed in cinephile circles or in film culture circles to really find anyone who believes it's as bad as people said it was. And I think a lot of people, or at least the sort of people I know, the people who I read, the people who I interact with, already like Showgirls and think that it was misunderstood, think that it's a good film. I talk in the book about how there was this interview with Jacques Rivette at the end of the 90s, the great French director, one of the most challenging, rigorous filmmakers, a contemporary of Godard, a sort of a star of the original French New Wave. He thought Showgirls was a great film. He said it was one of his favorite American movies, of that era. So, I'm not first.
But have you had people come up to you and say that your book really helped them reevaluate the film?
I have, and it's been really nice. It's really nice when you hear that. I've also had people come up to me and say, hey, I spent the $13 and I spent the 5 hours or 4 hours reading it, and I don't believe you at all. And I've had people come up to me and say that they watched the movie again and really enjoyed it because they read the book. And I mean, it's a weird position to be in because it's not like I'm the filmmaker, so I don't really gain anything from them watching the movie again. I'm just happy that they gained something from watching the movie again after reading my book, or watching it to sort of prepare for reading my book. But I mean, I work as a film critic, so I'm very used to people, interacting with you in comment sections or emailing you, or even just at the theater with you. People want to engage, and if they agree, then they want to sort of talk about why they agree, and if they disagree, they want to tell you you're an idiot or tell you where you went wrong. And so I think that in the case of this, with having a book, I've gotten an awful lot of emails from people who I don't know, who found my address somewhere or messaged me on Facebook, and they kind of want to talk or argue or fight about Showgirls. I guess that's a good thing, but that doesn't mean that I've emailed them all back or engaged every one of them, because life's too short to fight with everyone you meet on the internet.
It's got to be some sort of testament to the power of the film, though, if people are still wanting to argue about this so many years after the movie's release.
Well, exactly, and that's what I mean, I'm glad you said that, and I think that that's true, which is the film is so obviously not negligible. Even if I'm not always sure, even in the process of writing the book, even in the process of talking with you about it right now, I'm not always sure exactly what the film is, right? I mean, it is in addition to being all the things you would expect from Verhoeven, which is that it's outrageous and it's over the top and it's satirical and it's cynical and it's explicit. I mean, that's sort of, the auteurist reading of the movie is not hard to make. it is sometimes hard for me to determine what the film is. If it's this really powerful movie because of the era that it's set in, is it powerful because it's dated? Is it powerful because it's a movie about a woman who will do anything to become famous, including humiliate herself? And that's also kind of what happened with Elizabeth-Berkley in the role, and, what happened to her in her career. Like, does it have power because it's such a disaster? Like, does it have this aura of catastrophe around it that makes it more than it is? I mean, one of the most interesting things someone said to me after a screening in Toronto, there was someone I didn't know. They came up to me afterwards and they said, watching it on the big screen, the movie felt big. Like, the movie felt like a big deal. And I guess I don't know if they felt like the movie was a big deal because a big deal was being made about it and there's a screening, with the author of a book on it, or if they sort of felt like the movie was so big and so powerful and so over the top that it sort of justified this discussion or justified this book. But as you can imagine, this is something that I sort of think about a fair amount of the time. Because once you've written this book, you're constantly reading what people say about your book, or you're constantly giving interviews, you're talking with the book and hoping that, you're justified in what you've done.
So what are you working on now?
So one of the things I'm working on now is I'm writing a book about a British director named Ben Wheatley, who made a really interesting film a couple of years ago called Kill List. I don't know if you've seen it. New one coming out called High Rise, which obviously I will talk about in the book, and that's for an American publisher. And there's another longer book project that I was supposed to be doing about the Coen brothers, which has sort of been a little sidelined and a little waylaid, which is unfortunate. I was making really good progress on it, and due to circumstances beyond my control, I'm not sure what's going to happen with that manuscript. And then in general, I'm just working, seeing films and writing about them and teaching about them. In addition to U of T, I do lecture series on different directors here in Toronto, so I'm trying to just decide who to do my next one on. I've done recently Kubrick and the Coens and Lynch, and I'm sort of trying to maybe not do a white male American director next, but it also has to be someone who commands enough of an audience that people are going to sort of show up for a 2-hour lecture with clips about their work. So I sort of have to decide who that's going to be.
All right, we are back, and we were talking about Showgirls. Now, Jay, I know you said you didn't have a chance to watch Showgirls 2, Pennies from Heaven, and that's Penny apostrophe S, just so you know. So at the end of the day, Penny is from Heaven. So, but how about you, Heather? Did you get to enjoy, let's say, Pennies from Heaven?
Boy, howdy. Let's talk about this movie. Holy hell. If anybody thinks Showgirls 1 is terrible, when they finish Pennies from Heaven, they're going to be thinking that they just watched Cassavetes' Faces. I'm really mixed on this. First of all, you want to talk about being too long, this one is over 2 hours long, and it has, I used to work at a public access station, and I've worked on programming that looked like we had about the same budget as this film. There's like a TV show called Star Dancer. I guess we should start from the beginning. Penny from the original Showgirls. It's the same actress. It's Rena Riffel. who wrote and directed this. She wrote and directed Pennies from Heaven. She's still with Jimmy, which is Glenn-Plummer, same actor from the original Showgirls, and they're still married. And there's a reference to the kid, but he's telling her that she's never going to be a dancer. She's just a stripper, and she will never be a real dancer until she takes ballet. And I mean, she's like in her 30s. I mean, she looks, actually, Rena Riffel in this film looks almost the same as she does in Showgirls. And this film came out just a few years ago. So whatever she's doing, you know, she looks great. But it's kind of like ballet is something you take when you're like 4. If you want to be a professional ballerina, you know, you don't take it in your 30s and expect to be a professional at it. But and she decides, you know, and she's obsessed with a show called Star Dancer, and she wants to be on Star Dancer. So she basically leaves him and goes on this journey where she ends up with a cult. And there's references to Madame Blavatsky and the Illuminati, and this film really makes no sense, and it's I don't know, but it has 4 of the original actors from Showgirls, which I found fascinating, because you have her and Glenn-Plummer, but you have Dewey Weber, who was the Elvis guy in the beginning and end of Showgirls, his character's name's Jeff, and then you have Greg Travis, who was the Phil Newkirk character.
To let folks know, there's a shorter cut of this movie that I have yet to watch. It's 100 minutes as opposed to 145 minutes.
Oh. Yeah, well, that's not the cut we got to watch, is it, Mike?
No. And it's funny that you, I think Jay brought up David-Lynch at the beginning of the discussion, because this feels so Lynchian to me, and like kind of bargain basement Lynch, but it feels like kind of like this weird extension of Inland Empire. Like these are the cut scenes from Inland Empire or something, you know. It's so.
Oh, now I'm intrigued. Well, I know Rena Riffel's worked with David Lynch. She's in Mulholland Drive.
And it definitely feels like an influence on this. I mean, it is so strange that it just intrigued me the whole way through. Like, I didn't think when I saw that this was 145 minutes that I would be able to sit through the entire thing. But I was just compelled because it just keeps taking those strange turns. Like, yeah, the cult and all of these things where it's just like, what the fuck am I watching? Just over and over again. I kept asking myself that because it just felt like we were kind of diving into new adventures and almost like a new movie every, 20 minutes or so?
I know. I have to give it some high points for just a complete willingness to just go, it's almost like mini movies, because at one point there's like, she stumbles onto a woman who just murdered somebody, and all of a sudden it's a horror movie now. Or wait a minute, now she's with, because it has Shelley Michelle, who I think is best known for being like a famous Hollywood body double back in the 90s. And she pops up, and I guess she's the approximation to Crystal in this film, but they recreate the pool scene. However, Rena, she gives it the tallest try, but she doesn't look like she's got rickets or anything in the pools, so, which is probably a good thing. I'm not, it's not a complaint on my part, but I mean, you could make this film a drinking game with any time there's a reference to the original, right down to like Jimmy opening a new business where he's starting a line of T-shirts that says "Life sucks," which is that whole line between him and Elizabeth-Berkley. It is truly bizarre. I don't think I could say it's a good movie, but I give it points for just being balls out. Like, we're going to do this. The music. Oh my god! At one point, there's like a showgirl strippery. I don't think it's a full-on strip number, but very strippery number set to the Nutcracker Suite. But like this MIDI version of it, almost. Like, I don't think it's true MIDI, but it's close. And it's just. It boggles. If cocaine was the drug of choice for Showgirls 1, I would say airplane glue was the drug of choice for Showgirls 2, or perhaps some mild psychedelics.
Wow, I'm legitimately more interested in watching this than ever rewatching Showgirls.
I actually would recommend that you check it out. It is something to be experienced.
This is true. This is true. I mean, you love it or hate it. You cannot say you've ever seen anything like it. And Jay, you might either love Mike and I after watching it and be like, I'm so glad they recommended it, or you're going to be like, fuck them. Like, how dare they? So you're gonna feel either love or hate towards us. So.
I guess my biggest question would be, why was it made? I mean, Showgirls is a notorious flop, so it's not really trying to cash in on the name recognition.
Well, you say that, though. Showgirls is now actually, due to home video, like MGM's part of their top 20 all-time moneymakers. Like, that movie made its profit back and more on home video due to the whole cult success of it. I mean, it's weird. It flopped big time theatrically, but when it went to DVD and VHS, it soared.
Showgirls 2 kind of reminds me of the Kramer painting. It's kind of a elusive, offensive brute, yet I can't look away.
Oh my, that's perfect. It is something. I'm just fascinated that they got 4 people from the movie. To me, it almost felt like a mini Showgirls reunion. I'm surprised they didn't get Len Tucci, who was Mama Bazoom, in it. That's all they were missing. They just need Mama Bazoom to come back.
Well, she's doing Orange is the New Black now. She's busy.
She's got a real career.
She's on that show, and she's great on it.
Well, oh man, but yeah, I wish. Yeah, see, the sequel also should have had Robert-Davi in it, but I think again, Davi's probably doing something that's a little more above ground. Assuming,
well, I would say every movie would benefit from having Robert-Davi in it. So,
amen. Absolutely, something to be experienced. That's for sure.
All right, well, with that, let's take another break and play an interview with the director and writer of Showgirls 2, Rena Riffel. How did you get your start in the business?
I started coming down to LA taking commercial acting classes, and that was when I was, I think, 18 years old. I just stuck with it and finally got an agent, and that's how I got in this business.
What were some of your early roles like?
Well, actually, Showgirls was one of my first parts.
That's quite a beefy role for a first part.
Yeah, I got one part before that in a movie that it didn't really get released, and it's called Art Deco Detective, and it was a lead in that film, and it was a dark comedy. But that film helped me get Showgirls.
What was that experience like for you working on Showgirls, especially so early in your career?
Oh, it was amazing. It was that feeling that I think a lot of actors, they come to LA and you're trying to get that big break. That's what it felt like. Like I landed this amazing part in this huge film with Paul Verhoeven directing. So exciting.
What was your relationship like with some of the actors and actresses on screen with you?
Everyone was just really excited and supportive, and we were all just trying to do the best job we could. We had a lot of dance rehearsal, and so that's really where we spent the most time together.
Had you had dance experience before that?
Yeah, and that was another thing. I came to LA, as a teenager wanting to be a professional dancer. So I started pursuing that at first, but, that was my first love. But I think, having the dance background definitely helped me get the part in Showgirls.
What was it like working with Paul Verhoeven? I've heard that he can be a little intense.
He was very nice. I thought he was great. He was very nice. And, yeah, there were times where we were running behind schedule, which would happen because all the setups were very complicated and he wanted the perfect lighting. So I remember, a few times he'd be like, hurry up, everyone. But that was just, for the crew, like to the actors, he was just very gentle and sweet and kind and supportive. So it was a great experience.
It must have been interesting, you being, pretty young at the time, one of your first roles, and this being like Elizabeth-Berkley's big breakout, having been in television before that, and here she is in this starring role. Mm-hmm. What was she like to work with?
She really gave it her all. Just her commitment to the part, of course, like you see it on screen. She gave 100%. So she was very serious about the role, and she just tried really hard, and and gave it her all. She was very nice and professional. I was really impressed with how hard she worked. And she would be there at 5 a.m. for our call time, just enthusiastic and excited. And of course, I admired her at the time, you know, how she was so free about doing the nude scenes because, you know, of course, that is very uncomfortable. I don't think it's, you know, an easy thing to do, but she knew that that was part of the role for her. And so she was just very professional, but just did it, you know, because sometimes people, like actresses, will, you know, feel uncomfortable or throw a fit or whatever, but, you know, she knew that that was part of the movie.
Now, I know you were, you know, kind of joking around, but also kind of serious when you're listing off some of your credits early on, you know, actress, producer, director. But yes, you've done so much, model, singer. And I read that one of your songs is actually in Showgirls.
Yeah, I pursued a music career for a long time. At this point, I've kind of given up on that avenue, which I'm happy about. But yeah, at the time, I loved being a songwriter and singer, and so I got a song in the film called Deep Kiss, and a small part of it is played during Elizabeth's lap dance scene, like right before she does her lap dance.
How did you manage to get one of your own songs on the soundtrack? That's amazing.
Oh, thank you. Well, I just gave the music supervisor my cassette tape, because that's what we had back then. And and it was a demo that I had done. And she said, you know, well, she can't do me any favors, but she'll play it for Paul Verhoeven. And if he likes it, then, you know. And then she told me, you know, that he actually loved it, and she didn't tell him it was me. But then she played it for everyone in her office, and she's like, you guys, do you think this song is any good? And she didn't tell them it was me, and they all said that they liked it. So, yeah, that's how it happened. I remember I was so excited about that because I thought, you know, it would lead to a record deal, of course. I'm happy that it's in the movie, and my song credit is right below the symbol for Prince.
Yeah, that's got to feel good.
Yeah, it's a nice accomplishment.
One of your next biggest roles, as far as I know, and please correct me if I'm wrong, was being in striptease.
Yes.
Did you feel like you're going to be doomed to be in stripper/showgirl type movies for the rest of your career?
I didn't at the time. Yeah, I was just excited when I heard about that film because striptease was it was pretty much getting the same kind of publicity and hype as Showgirls. It was going to be like the next big thing. And I heard about it on TV, actually, because they did something about how Demi Moore was going to be the highest paid actress, you know, in history. Then I told my agent, you know, try to get me in on this film. And so they got me an audition, and then I had a call back, and then I got that. And it, you know, once again, there was a dance audition, even though it wasn't as intense as the Showgirls dance audition. That one was kind of like an advanced technique dance audition for jazz. And then this one we had to go in and choreograph our own routine, and then that was the dance audition process.
Were you able to use some of the stuff that you had learned in Showgirls for striptease?
No, actually. No, I just pretty much did a jazz dance in the striptease audition. And I was doing, you know, pirouettes, which is, I don't think, like in the strip clubs that they actually do pirouettes, but
not that I've seen. No.
Yeah, I was kind of, you know, I was trying to show off. But actually, Marguerite Derricks, she was the choreographer for Showgirls. And then when I went to the callback, there was Marguerite, you know, sitting there with the producers, and she was the choreographer for striptease as well.
Can I ask you, what was it like working in Mulholland Drive?
That was great. I had just that small part, but it was, supposed to be a TV series. So I was going to be on the TV series, and I was going to be introduced in the pilot episode. And, that's what they told me. So, but I'm just happy I'm still in the movie. That one of my scenes stayed in the film. But yeah, that was great. I loved it. It was amazing working with David-Lynch, and I'm happy I'm in Mulholland Drive.
I've always been curious about the way that was shot, as far as the way that it made that transition from TV pilot to the final movie that we all saw.
Mm-hmm.
Did you come back for reshoots, or were there more things that were shot with you that ended up on the cutting room floor, or how did that work for you?
Yeah, well, for me, they did ask me back for it wasn't really reshoot, but additional scenes that they were going to shoot. And so, yeah, I was set to do that, and I signed my contracts. And then something happened where, for some reason, they ended up not needing me for more. And then I found out something, I don't know if it's true or not, but one of the other actors I was supposed to possibly be in a scene with, but then that actor, I won't say who it is, but that actor was unavailable. So maybe that's what happened. But there's one more scene, but it's still part of the Pinks scene. It actually was supposed to take place before that scene at Pinks. And we are talking about a delivery, and there's a package, and if they'd picked it up yet. And, it was something really mysterious, and I didn't understand it. So I asked David-Lynch, what is this package that they're talking about? Because I'm confused. And he said, I don't know what the package is. He said, I'll figure that out later, which is so great because, I think, we all know that's how he works. He was just going to let the story, tell itself, and he was going to piece things together later on.
That movie is remarkable for having so many attractive blonde ladies in it all at once.
Oh, well, thank you. I think he intentionally cast, and I've heard this in people's theories before also, but all the blondes look very similar. Like they have the same hair cut, and then he dressed us very similar. Yeah, because, the one theory is that we are all actually the same person, just in different dimensions, or an awake or a dream state.
Yeah, the way that you look in that Pink scene definitely reminds me of the way that Naomi Watts looks at the end of the film when she's not Betty, not the
right.
nice Midwestern girl that we've seen.
Right, yeah. Yeah, and David-Lynch he made sure to try to make me, look really rough. And that was one thing when I was in the makeup trailer. He came in to see me, and he said, oh no, Rena looks way too, clean and fresh. We have to put bruises on her and grease her hair up, because, yeah, of course I washed my hair and, showing up all nice looking. But yeah, he really wanted, he made it a point. And he came back again, and I still wasn't messed up enough. So he asked them to make me look even worse. I remember I was thinking, gosh, because, at that time I wanted to look good. But then I thought, yeah, this will be cool, because so far I've just been doing these parts where, yeah, I'm all like glamorous with the fake eyelashes and all that. So yeah, I appreciated that he was going to do this for me. That was good.
I wanted to ask you, what came first, Showgirls, the musical, or Showgirls 2?
You mean the project that I had started and I talked about online? It was Showgirls, the musical?
Yeah, and I think I even saw a clip on YouTube with you in a musical version of Showgirls.
Well, there's so many, Showgirls parodies that are out. So that could have been...
please walk me through the Showgirls parodies. This I need to know.
Oh, yeah. They're just springing up everywhere, especially now. Well, okay, I'll start with what I was doing. When I first started doing my Showgirls parody sequel, I first called it Showgirl the Musical. So I don't know if that's what you saw, but I did shoot a trailer for it. And actually, I shot a short film, but it's not available anywhere. But, and then from there, I did, the full feature film, which came out to be Showgirls 2 Pennies from Heaven. But 2 years ago, I went to New York and to an off-Broadway theater and participated in Showgirls the Musical. So that could have been what you thought if I was singing, possibly. Is that what you thought? Yeah. So that was 2 years ago, and that was a big hit. It was, sold out always, and I was there for 6 weeks.
And what was that like for you, kind of revisiting Showgirls, and how would Showgirls the Musical, the one that you were creating, would that have been a musical as well?
Yeah, at the time I wanted it to be a musical, but then I didn't do that. And yeah, my original script that I wrote for it did have musical numbers, and she would, go into her little dream and just break out in a song and dance. And that was my version that was going to take, like $40 million to make it right. And after I waited a year and nothing was really coming through for me. So that's when I rewrote the script, and that's the film that's out now.
So yeah, tell me about the production of that. Tell me about Pennies from Heaven.
Yeah, so I rewrote the script to be, something that I could handle doing. And then having my experience from Trasharella, that helped me, of course. The way I would do it is I broke down the script, and with each location, which I messed up, when you're doing a very low-budget film, it's best not to have like 50 locations. And I'd already had that, and it was part of the storyline, so I was like, oh, I can do it, But it was really challenging, of course. And so what I would do is I would book a location and then shoot, every scene that takes place at that location, and then just get that over with. And then I would take a week off or even 2 weeks off and be planning the next location and all the scenes, and the wardrobe and any dance numbers, and then shoot that. So that's what I did it took 4 months to film the whole movie.
There is a really nice level of surreality to the film, and I don't know if it's that having worked with Lynch and having that familiarity with him, but if it almost feels like there's overtones of like Inland Empire kind of thing.
There is, and that is what I do. I make things surreal, and it has like a dark kind of feeling and mysterious. Yeah, I mean, it could have been a Lynch influencing me, but it's also what I'm drawn to. So that's just how I express myself.
And what was it like getting some of your original castmates back with you? Were they reticent at all, or were they gung-ho to take part in this?
Oh, they were gung-ho. They were excited, and that was so great, and so that worked out. But yeah, they were very supportive and excited to do it, and they knew what it was, and they knew, that we were having fun, and we're celebrating Showgirls by doing this also.
I've actually read different theories as to if it is a sequel or a prequel.
Oh, really? Oh, that's interesting. I like that. Well, yeah, so I don't know. It could be either one.
You're going to be like Lynch, and you'll have to figure it out.
Yeah. I'll have to figure out what I did. Yeah, I don't know what I did. Yeah, the whole thing, it kind of seems like a dream right now. Like, it's so intense working on making a film that, 5 years later you look back on it and you're like, oh my God, what was I? Because you were so absorbed in this, particular mood and influence. And then 5 years later, or like Trasharella, 10 years later, you're kind of a different person and more mature. And then you look back and, you have to figure out, what was going on at that time. But yeah, I just actually, I did a new edit, which I'm realizing as a filmmaker, this is something I keep repeating, like this pattern I keep repeating, because I did another edit of Trasharella as well. But so I did a new edit, and I don't know if you probably haven't seen it. Have you?
Now that's Showgirls 2, The Cut.
It's 90 minutes. It's a little over 90 minutes long instead of 2.5 hours long. And I took out a lot of the like kind of silly punchline comedy. And it just has a whole different feel to it, I think, that it does. That's it.
And I have to say, before I forget, some of Glenn-Plummer's lines are just amazing.
Oh, good.
Him talking about the H1N1, the swine flu. So good.
Right, yeah. Continuing from his other, from Showgirls. He was like germaphobe a little bit. But yeah, that's good.
Did you have to secure rights to use the name Showgirls or anything, or is it just, were you able to take the character and do what you want with it, or how did that work?
I had to get clearance, so I got approval and clearance from, the right people. But I also, made sure that it's definitely a parody, and, so yeah, it's a parody at the end of the day.
How were audiences taking it?
In the theaters, I had a few really good screenings, and the audience, they were cracking up laughing, and I think they enjoyed it. So that was a relief, because you never know how an audience is going to react,
Right.
And and that's what happened with Showgirls when it first was released, and in the theater, people, they saw it as a comedy, or they were laughing where they weren't supposed to laugh. That's kind of what happened during the making of the film. We didn't know it was going to get all these laughs, We just all were taking it really serious, even though there was, humor and some crazy lines. But for, Showgirls 2, I was going for the comedy. So, it worked. That was good.
Now, I know some people tried to distance themselves from Showgirls when it came out. Other people, I would say you are probably the one who has embraced it the most. Do you think that that's a fairly true statement?
Yeah, I think so. I've probably embraced it the most. But there's other cast members that, they're fine to show up to a Showgirls event, And I even think Gina-Gershon, she's embraced it. And if she could, because I've shown up to the Peaches Christ event in San Francisco, and she was interested in showing up. So, I think, and then Elizabeth-Berkley, actually, she did show up finally to a recent screening. Did you hear about that?
I have heard that she's kind of changed her tune a little bit on this, which I'm really glad for.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, so maybe she'll continue to open up about it. And I recently, like a few days ago, I don't know how old this interview was, but I think it's pretty new. But Paul-Verhoeven, for the 20-year anniversary of Showgirls, he did an interview, and he really opened up about what, like, the psychology of where he was going with it and what happened, and just reveals more than I've ever heard him reveal about what he thinks happened to the film and to Elizabeth, in the aftermath of how it was received. So that's interesting.
Yeah, I've always felt like that movie had like a target on its back. I don't know if it was trying to take down Verhoeven after his success for Basic Instinct, or the guns were aimed at Joe Eszterhas just because of all the money that he was making on scripts, which was just ridiculous at the time, or what it was. But it just seemed like Showgirls never really had a chance.
Yeah, there was you just never know. But for some reason, it came out and the industry just tore it apart. And who knows what happened. I know that when Showgirls, when I got the part, there was a time where they lost the financing, and then another company came in, the company that ended up producing it, they picked it up. So then we were all told, don't worry, it's a go, because the movie was almost canceled for a short time. So who knows if there was some kind of weird thing that happened, because audiences, I think most audiences actually loved the film. That's what I always hear.
I know you're very familiar with camp. A lot of your work is very campy, and I mean that as a compliment. Do you think that the movie was supposed to be campy, or that it has kind of turned into that over the years?
I think that it was meant to be over the top, but I don't think it was intentional camp. And that's actually, what makes it real, true camp. Because, we weren't trying to be ironic and silly, but it happened anyway.
I want to ask you, what are those Peaches Christ screenings like? Because I've read about some of her screenings, and it's just like, they sound amazing, but I've never been able to attend one being over here in Detroit. What is it like going to a Peaches Christ screening of Showgirls?
Well, it is like a high. The energy level is just intense and incredible, fun. Everyone is going wild and crazy, and it's amazing. It's really great. You have a great time, and it's just crazy. There is I don't know if they call them, well, basically they're lap dancers, and she gets volunteers, and they go out into the audience and do this lap dance all over the place, and it's just hysterical. Everyone is laughing and participating, and it's just really fun.
What are some of the things that you're working on these days?
Well, I have a few different projects. One is that I just moved back to LA, so I'm going to start auditioning and get an agent. I have to basically start all over as an actress, but I'm really excited about this. I just moved back here a few days ago. Other than that, I'm working on a novel that I'm writing. I'm painting, and at the moment I'm not working on a new film, but I will be at some point. I'm just kind of giving it a break right now. I have a new film that I made called Astrid. I'm still working on it, but it's a self-portrait basically of a crazy woman, which I play, and she just loses her mind while she's making her self-portrait avant-garde film.
I also read that you had directed one called My Wife Is at Home. Is that?
Yeah, I made that as well. And it's very avant-garde, really long takes. And it's more of an installation, I'm thinking. It's not commercial at all. But yeah, I completed that film. And I still love music, and sometimes I'll think I would love to just write a song, and it's fun going in the studio and making music. But yeah, I'm doing so many things. I have to limit them because I get spread thin. So yeah, I'm going to give music a break.
Are you big on the social media and blogging and all that?
I love it. I would like to do it more. I've started a few blogs, and then I end up I stop them because it's a lot of work. So, but yeah, it's like I want to have a fashion blog. I would love to do that. And I'm on Instagram, which I need to get 1 million followers on Instagram, or at least 1,000.
Well, what is your Instagram handle so I can promote you and see if we can get you at least one more follower?
It's just Rena Riffel. Twitter is Cinema Rena.
Well, hey, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate this.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you, Mike.
All right, we're back and we're talking about Showgirls. So guys, really at the end of the day, would you recommend that people who haven't seen this one check it out, or people that have seen it, should they go back and experience Showgirls again? Is there enough there to do that?
That's a good question. I think if you haven't, if you're someone that is interested in sort of in cinema that is campy but tonally weird, and you're a fan of Paul Verhoeven and Robert-Davi and Gina-Gershon, I would recommend it. Otherwise, you probably won't enjoy it. If you've already seen it, then you probably know the answer to that question. Because if you've already seen it once, you're going to know whether or not you want to go back to it. Some people love this movie and have shrines to it. Other people, obviously, are like, I'm good. I don't need to see that again. So, so that would be my answer.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I don't think it's necessarily worthy of reappraisal. If you've seen it, you kind of know what to think about it. If you've never seen it, it's one of the most famous, flops ever. It's worth seeing at least once. It's interesting now that Elizabeth-Berkley has sort of come around to embracing it, because I know she was embarrassed by it for such a long time. But there's a clip on YouTube now of her introducing it at some screening in LA, and I guess it's good that she's embracing it now, but I still think it might be too soon for her to re-embrace it, because her performance in it is legitimately embarrassing. Like, still to this day, not the nudity or anything, but just like her dancing is creepy, and it's a bad performance just all around.
Well, my question, is it a bad performance or is it bad writing? Because I kept thinking that too, because on one hand I'm like, this is a terrible performance, but then there are moments where I'm just like, I don't know what else you would do with that role as an actress, because it's the way it's written, the way Nomi is written. She's written so bipolar. And just, she's like Yosemite Sam, with titties. It doesn't. I don't know. Like, you would have to be like the female equivalent to Robert-Davi, like Susan Tyrrell. I would watch Susan. Susan Tyrrell could probably make that good. But
holy shit, that would be amazing.
Oh my
Showgirls starring Susan Tyrrell.
Yes, that's what heaven is for, right there. It's all the movies that should have been made. But
I do wonder though, how much is the writing and how much is the performance? Like, is it in Joe Eszterhas's script that she violently throws around French fries, or is that an actor's choice?
I think that'll go down with the whole, is Hayden Christensen a bad actor, or was it just George Lucas's writing kind of debate?
Well, I chalk everything up as if there's anything wrong with anything related to George Lucas, it's George Lucas's fault.
But see, that'd be another tie to Girl in Gold Boots, because you have this character who makes it, ascends to the top of the Go-Go Girl pile, and her dancing is highly questionable. So I'm just going to view it as a tribute to Ted V. Michaels. Why not?
Yeah, I've been courting Verhoeven for an interview for probably 2 years now, like before we even did our Starship Troopers episode, probably all the way back when we did our RoboCop episode, which I think was like the second or third episode of the projection booth. And we tried like hell to get Elizabeth-Berkley. I even tried to play the local angle, because like I go by her high school like, every day on my way to work practically. So she lived right near where I work now and all this kind of stuff. So I was really trying to hey, local show, come on, support, kind of. No. And then even with Robert-Davi, like we've even interviewed Robert-Davi before, though my co-host managed to lose the file at the time for tracks. Was that the name of the? Oh God, what was that?
Is that Shadow Stevens track?
Yes, the Shadow Stevens.
Oh my God.
I've never seen that.
Oh, it's something. It's definitely something. It's Tarantino's favorite episode of the projection booth. Just saying. That's all I'm saying.
I'll have to go back and listen to it. Did you interview Shadow Stevens at least?
Well, we interviewed Shadow Stevens and we interviewed Robert-Davi, and both of those interviews managed to get deleted somehow.
That's unfortunate.
Oh.
Yes, it was a very, very sad state of affairs.
Oh my goodness. What was Davi like?
He was a great guy. He even went back and professionally recorded his little, this is Robert-Davi, and you're in the projection booth. And so we've got one of those clips of him saying that, and it's just gorgeous. He's got those great tones to his voice and everything. Even, he sounds like he's singing even when he's not. He's got that mellifluous voice. But yeah, so we tried all these people, and unfortunately, nobody would talk to the projection booth about it, though. And in the interim, while I'm trying to get Verhoeven, that's when he did, I think it was down in Florida, he went finally on the record talking all about Showgirls and stuff, and it's just like, God damn it. Why couldn't we have that?
I didn't know he had done that. Is that what is that, for a podcast or?
No, it was a appreciation of his work. They're doing a retrospective.
Okay, can you find that online somewhere?
I don't think so, but I know there's an article about it, so I will definitely be linking to the article when I post this episode.
Okay, yeah, because I've always been curious about how he feels about this movie.
And the thing that always kills me, and I don't know why I can't remember this for the life of me, I always think that this was his last U.S. movie, like he went into hiding after this, but no. More stuff after this one, because there were a lot of people that just disappeared after Showgirls happened, like Eszterhas, never wrote again as far as we know. Yeah, Elizabeth-Berkley went into hiding for a long time. It wasn't until First Wives Club that she kind of came back and was okay to show her face, and people are like, wow, she's actually an okay actress in this. So there were a lot of folks that just didn't want to talk about this movie, didn't want to support it. They were all about it before, but as soon as it opened and people either didn't get the joke or just, saw what it was for what it was, people just, were like, okay, I'm going to distance myself from this movie for a long darn time.
Yeah, well, actually, one thing that is interesting, and to me this gives Verhoeven major points of slack, is that when this film won a bunch of Razzies, he actually was the first director to ever show up to the award ceremony and pick it up. So he obviously, I think, has a sense of humor.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
About it. And just looking up because I got curious about Eszterhas, because I kept thinking, I'm sure I knew he did something after this. Yeah, he did a film. Well, he wrote a film called Burn, Hollywood, Burn.
That's
the worst thing. It's so bad.
Well, I think it's the one directed by Alan Smithy. So,
well, it was a movie about Alan Smithy, and then it ended up turning out so bad that the director took his name off, so it literally became an Alan Smithy movie.
Yeah, and I think that's what put an end to the whole Alan Smithy name, if memory serves.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, that was Arthur Hiller, if memory serves, and he was just like, yeah, no, not doing it.
That's amazing to think of a film so horrible that it actually killed the Alan Smithy trend. That is, that's astounding. Wow, let's just have a moment of silence for that.
I was really hoping when I came back to this, because I said we've covered, this is actually our third Verhoeven film that we've done on the show, and we've done RoboCop and we've done Starship Troopers, and I was really hoping that when I came back to Showgirls, I would have that kind of Starship Troopers epiphany and just be like, oh my God, this is a terrific film. Why did I just never see this? And why did I have these horrible memories of this film burned into my brain for 21 years? Well, unfortunately, I just didn't have that epiphany.
Well, they can't all be winners. Verhoeven's filmography is pretty, as a whole, I'd say very stellar. So he's kind of allowed to have a few missteps. And I mean, in this film, at least, I mean, it's entertaining, and it's not a great film, but they're not all going to be spatters. So what can you do?
And I would say he rebounded pretty strongly after this with Starship Troopers.
Well, with Starship Troopers, a Black Book. I mean, yeah, I haven't seen Tricked yet. And I know he's got another new one coming out pretty soon. But yeah, I mean, he managed to do it. I mean, I would say that Hollow Man's definitely another black mark on his record, but he makes up for it with things like Total Recall and those.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's take our final break here. We're going to play a preview for next week's show.
This summer, Bruce Willis is back in business.
Thanks for saving me, tough guy.
And business is booming.
I was afraid you weren't going to drop by.
Hudson Hawk.
That excites me.
Check, please. The best cat burglar that ever lived.
I didn't want to do it. All I wanted was a cappuccino.
But he can't retire.
Maybe nobody told you. I quit stealing.
If he wants to keep on living.
This is a brand new tuxedo!
Watch your step. Hold your breath. Hang on for dear life. And catch the Hawk.
Good plan, Junior.
Bruce Willis, Danny Aiello, Andy McDowell, Hudson Hawk.
Sounds like a party.
That's right. We are back next week to talk about another infamous film, Hudson Hawk. Before we go, I want to thank this week's guest co-host, Heather. What have you been up to lately?
I just published an article on the post-punk band Suburban Lawns on Dangerous Minds, which is one of the sites I regularly write for. And I'm currently working on an article about Roger Watkins' corruption. Those are kind of the two main things, in addition to books and other sundries.
How about you, Jay? What's the latest over at Red Letter Media?
Well, we're still doing our show Half in the Bag. We are now we just recently did our 100th episode, and we're still going for some reason. But we also just released our film Space Cop, which has been three years in the making. So it's now on Blu-ray and digital and all that. So you can get that on our website.
Awesome.
Space Cop is the story of a cop from the future of space that travels back in time.
The future of space, not just from the future, and he's in space?
He's from the future of space.
Wow.
And he loves hot dogs.
Well, who doesn't?
Yes.
Right. Actually, there's a great hot dog scene in Showgirls, too. So,
yes.
Where they just discuss hot dogs, or do they act like the pub doggy chow scene, or do they actually eat hot dogs?
Yeah, I think you're just going to have to watch it for yourself, Jay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I want to now.
You've heard of the phrase burning the candle at both ends? It's kind of like that.
Oh, okay.
It's burning the hot dog at both ends.
Yeah.
Wait a minute.
You've seen Requiem for a Dream, right?
Oh, God, Mike, no. He's going to be disappointed now.
Does Keith David show up? Because if not, then I will be disappointed.
Unfortunately, he doesn't show up, nor does he take anything out for air.
Okay.
Yeah. Jay, I got to ask you, and if I need to leave this part off the record, I certainly will. What was that whole Max Landis thing like?
What was it like as far as actually meeting him in person and all that?
Well, I guess let's set it up a little bit here. So you did an amazing review of, what the hell was that movie called?
American Ultra. Yeah.
American Ultra. I almost called it American Splendor, but that was a good movie. American Ultra. And next thing I know, you're announcing, hey, here's our interview with Max Landis, where he's basically coming on to tell us that we were wrong about American Ultra.
Yeah.
So what do you do? Like tweet at you and manage to fly in on his personal drone or something?
Well, it's not supposedly, but he is, a fan of ours, and he's been watching our stuff for a while, I guess, and he was disappointed in our opinions of American Ultra, because that's a movie that he apparently is rather proud of how it turned out. He often talks about how he feels very distant from the process. Like, as a writer, you're not on set or anything like that. So, oftentimes you write a thing, someone else makes it, and the end result may be nothing close to what you wanted it to be. But that's one where he feels that the movie was an accurate reflection of his script. So when we kind of tore it apart, he felt kind of disappointed by that. So he made some tweets about how he felt disappointed by it. And, he's like, oh, I'm not surprised they like Jurassic World, which is only half true. I didn't like Jurassic World. And for some reason, people interpreted that as us having a feud, even though we never responded. We never talked about it. It's just him saying, oh, I'm disappointed they didn't like the movie. But then we just reached out to him and be like, hey, you want to fly to Milwaukee and we'll shoot some stuff? And he said, sure. So he flew out and we shot that interview where we gave him a chance to kind of say his side of the story of, screenwriting and what it's like to work in Hollywood as a screenwriter and how distant you feel from the final movie and all that stuff. But yeah, people kind of interpreted that we were having some sort of feud, and then the interview was like us making up, but there was never a feud.
Nor did I really feel like the interview was you guys making up, which I really appreciated, that it wasn't like, oh my God, we're so embarrassed that we have this guy here whose movie we were kind of critiquing.
No, we can, you can critique someone's work and still talk to them as a human being. Like, there were some people that seemed to be disappointed that we didn't, rip him a new asshole to his face. But it's like, why would we do that? He just wrote a movie we didn't like.
I thought it was very nice of him to come out, and that it was very nice of you guys to give him the time and everything. And I thought it was a terrific, terrific episode.
Of, just the interview, or the, because we also did a Best of the Worst episode with him, too.
I haven't seen the Best of the Worst one with him. I'll have to watch that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's more casual, obviously. It's just us hanging out and watching bad movies. But no, he was a good sport, and he's, he talks a lot. He's very passionate, but he's just a movie nerd like us that just happens to be a part of that world, which we're very much on the outside of that world.
So where can folks go to find out more about you and your work and to buy copies of Space Cop?
You can go to redlettermedia.com or youtube.com/redlettermedia.
Well, thanks again, guys, for joining me in this very enlightening discussion about Showgirls. And we'll have links to where our listeners can find out more about you guys, Jay and Heather, over at our website, projection-booth.com. Head on over, rate and review the show, give us some of your hard-earned cash via our Patreon, or just leave some feedback. Those are just a few more ways that you can help us take over the world.
You have great tits. They're really beautiful.
Thank you.
I like nice tits. I always have. How about you?
I like having nice tits.
If you enjoy this show and want more people to know about it, head on over to iTunes, leave a comment, and rate it 5 stars. Make sure you like and share us on Facebook, and don't forget to follow us on Twitter. Just search for Christopher Media. Thank you in advance for supporting Christopher Media by clicking on the PayPal button and by clicking through to all the sponsors who support ChristopherMedia.net. Most importantly, we would like to take the time to extend an extra special thanks to you. Christopher Media could not exist without your support. Thank you for visiting ChristopherMedia.net, and thank you for listening. Christopher Media. Let's make some noise.